Merrimack TV, are you ready? Let's see. Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the May 17th, 2021 Merrimack School Board meeting. Please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next on the agenda is guidelines for public participation. Even though we are back in person here in the Matthew Thornton room for our school board meetings, we understand that many community members still do not feel comfortable coming here in person. Therefore, we have continued to allow the public comments to continue to be sent in an email to us for the foreseeable future. At some point, we will revisit that, but for now, that's the way that it is. To do this, you may send an email to publiccomment@sau26.org. Again, that email address is publiccomment@sau26.org. We do require your name and address for the record on such documentation. Based on the amount of information that we received tonight, our goal is to always read off verbatim the comments as we receive them. If the comments become too heavy in volume, we would just have to not read public comment into testimony. It's really just an all or nothing proposition. We just like to be clear up front and set the expectations in case we find that we can't read all of them. I just like to address this up front before we find ourselves in that situation. Hopefully we don't. Next on the agenda is public participation. Is there anyone who has public comments out in the audience that would like to have any public comments? Just go up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, do we have any emails, public comments?
There are a series of emails. There's 6 that have some multiples.
Okay.
So we will start with Lisa Mungovin, 14 Lamson Drive. Hello, I am writing to the school board as I have concerns about mask policies in the fall. It was a truly difficult decision for my family to choose remote or not so early in decision process for the fall, not knowing what the district policies will be for mitigation of COVID-19. According to Dartmouth-Hitchcock, 25% of children experience complication or become long haulers of the disease. It is concerning to me, given the nature of a large portion of our community, that there will be zero mitigation practices come the fall of 2021. I would like to encourage the board to continue the mask and mitigation policies for the first semester of school in the fall until January 2022. This would allow for parents who wanted or needed their children to receive the vaccine to get inoculated before removing the mask policy, should a vaccine for younger children be available by then. Especially in the upper and lower elementary, it would be the fair and reasonable thing to do for our community. Please keep this in mind when it is time to review our district's mask policy. She emailed back also to add, the CDC currently says those who are fully vaccinated can remove masks in certain settings where masks are not required. Another reason for the school district to continue the use of its mask policy, unless the district requires proof of who is and who is not vaccinated, like other vaccines are required. I know this vaccine isn't required yet. And that is Lisa. Next, we have from Ken Martin, 31 Woodward Road, and says, please find my letter for public comment regarding the upcoming school board meeting on Monday, May 17th attached. And I'm opening the attachment as we speak. And still opening it. Oh, good Lord, I have reading glasses on. So bear with me, Mr. Martin. There you go, we are pinching out. Dear Merrimack School Board, I am writing to you today to encourage you to join the numerous other school boards, businesses, universities, and nonprofits across New Hampshire informally and publicly opposing House Bill 544, otherwise known as the Divisive Concepts Bill. The idea that has some of our state leaders who claim to embrace less government oversight and value local control have also introduced legislation that stands to be the exact antithesis of these ideals is confusing, dangerous, and should concern any voter that has given them their support. Even more concerning, Was their approach to include it in the state budget so as not to warrant any kind of discussion or debate in regard to eliminating a fundamental cornerstone of a free and fair public education, which is the freedom to openly and safely question, discuss, and deliberate real-world topics that we all face every day? What many of these lawmakers don't understand is that teachers don't need to bring issues such as racism, sexism, income inequality, equity, and inclusion up in the classroom. The students already do that because students know what world they live in. They are already having these discussions with their peers and their teachers unsolicited because they are more than globally aware of the kinds of things that go on in the world than any generation prior to them. In seeing how there is a segment of the population that wishes to suppress these kinds of conversations, it's easy to see why so many students are hungry for information regarding these difficult topics. Teachers are asked to speak with students about drug abuse, suicide recognition and prevention, sex education, and mental health. They participate in active shooter drills and discuss domestic abuse and homelessness every day. Teachers don't get to decide what issues our students are faced with and what questions they may have. Their job is to help them figure those issues out and the emotions that come with them. And isn't that the job of our entire community? To help prepare the next generation for the world we are giving them? This is what teachers do. They answer their students' questions, all of their questions, even the hard ones. This is how education works. I sometimes see criticism of our schools in regards to lack of encouragement with critical thinking skills. At the very roots of these difficult, challenging, and important discussions are critical thinking skills happening in real time. Please let Concord know that Merrimack stands for ideals such as free thought, open discussion, and the idea that no topic, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes us, should be silenced. Okay, I'm going back to the email. So that is the end of the comment from Ken Martin. On to, and I hope I get your name right, Patricia Heilhecker at 18 Meeting House Road. Dear board members, I am surprised and disconcerted that you are seriously considering teaching this destructive nonsense to our children. I wanted you to know, as a 40-plus year resident of Merrimack, I strongly urge you not to do this. And the subject matter of the email was critical race theory. Next is Colleen Carlson at 3 Collins Avenue, Merrimack. Hello, please consider hosting the graduation ceremony in the same manner as in previous years prior to COVID. Those of us that have wanted to get the vaccine have gotten the vaccine. There's no need to limit the number of guests for the graduates. This group of seniors has had a mediocre senior year at best. Please do not take this last celebration away from them and their families. Other area schools are proceeding as normal. I hope that Merrimack chooses to do the right thing as well. Sincerely, Colleen Carlson. Next we have, again, I hope I get the name right, Sandra Duzanis. And I don't have an address, so I cannot read into public comment. I will email Sandra during our meeting and ask for an address for the record. And let's see. This one also doesn't, but I'm seeing if it's a student. And it is. So this is from Taylor Duzanis, who is a senior. Members of the school board, after a long year dealing with all of the things that the pandemic has brought us, I strongly feel that the senior class deserves a traditional graduation. Given what U.S. government officials, along with the CDC, have stated in updated guidance, there should be no reason that safe outside graduation can't happen with all in attendance wearing masks and seated in small family units. Please take this opportunity to provide a traditional graduation ceremony for these kids who have been through so much already. And again, I will do my best to get the other one. And actually, it looks like it is a duplicate of what his mom sent us, so we should be all set.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the formal signing of the master agreement between the Merrimack Educational Support Staff Association and the Merrimack School Board. I'd like to welcome Cindy Poirier, Carol Scopa, Jen Simon, and Kim Gontars. Thank you. One thing I'd like to say before we get started, there is a little bit of a glitch, I understand, in that the paperwork that we would normally sign as part of this formal process is not here. But what we will do to kind of course, make everything official is just sign in the office. So Mark, who all signs that? Do we all sign that? Who else signs?
So it's the superintendent, the school board chair, and Cindy, why don't you tell from your end?
It'll be myself.
But maybe, is the microphone on? I don't know if it.
Just press the button and this should be a green.
Oh,
Oh,
okay, good. All
oh,
right.
that's
Oh,
even
no, it's
greener.
greener.
Okay.
Okay, if from MESA, it'll be myself, Cindy Poirier as president. It'll be Jen Simon as secretary. It'll be Carol Scopa as negotiator chair. And Kim Gontars as our go-to fix all the problems person. Treasurer. Treasurer. Yes.
And even though that document is not here, that only signifies the formality of this particular moment. But certainly we want to appreciate all that you do and the great work that we did in coming to an agreement and the real work you guys do every day, all of you. So we're really lucky to have such a talented group of folks in our district helping kids every single day. I wanted to see, Shannon, if you or Jenna had anything to say as part of the negotiating team.
Thank you. And Jenna, I have to say, joined me as second chair for the negotiating team, and I thought it made a pretty dynamic duo. But it really came, with our negotiations, I think there were things that were kept in mind throughout the discussions that made this agreement possible, in that everyone was very respectful and mindful of our district goals. We were very respectful and mindful of the needs of staff. And of course, we always discussed the needs of the taxpayers. And it never stopped coming up throughout the negotiation, so we could find something that would be agreeable to all. So I just can't say enough about the process, how well it went. I know we were on Zoom and breakout rooms, and honestly, I think it could not have gone any smoother considering, and I will give Kim Gontars a lot of credit for that.
Yes.
I think she did a wonderful job keeping your technology dynamic going, but I can't
Right.
say enough about the process and really your team at the table and just finding that common ground. Because we knew that everyone had to give a little to get what we need for this agreement. So thank you very much. Thank you for taking all your afternoons and making this all happen. So thank you so much, and we appreciate all you do.
I'd like to say just one thing, that thank you also for keeping the integrity of our union and also the excellence of the Merrimack School District, the employees, the whole, overall of everyone involved in this. So I want to thank you. And I also want to thank you, Dr. McLaughlin, for being a wonderful person, open communication. Whenever we had conversations, you listened to both sides. So I want to thank you for your service here in Merrimack.
Thank you very much.
And Carol would like to say something.
Okay, once again.
Go to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, and as Shannon said, we'd like to thank Shannon and Jenna. They worked so hard with us. Shannon especially always found a solution, and she always listened to us. And because, they don't really always understand our roles on certain things we had, but we were always open to discussion with them. And it was, as Shannon said, a give and take, so I'd really like to thank Shannon and Jenna for listening to us. Also like to thank, see, he's there, Matt, he was on our team, and along with Melissa Gagney, who couldn't be here tonight. So thank you all for supporting us. And, Merrimack Education Supports That Association, which we refer to as MESA. Would also like to thank all the people that were on the MESA team, which was Cindy Poirier, who is our president and also our para rep, Kathleen Bouvier, who couldn't make it tonight, but she's a certified speech assistant, and she represented them, and Deb Donahue, who represented our assistants, Cheryl Paulson, who was our kindergarten instructional assistant rep, Kim Gontas, who was our media assistant rep, and also did all the paperwork of combining all the documents and the TAs and keeping our technology up. And really, thank you to her. She made it all happen for us. And Jen Simon, who had taken all our notes for us during our negotiation. And I think of all that big group effort, we were able to get the the new contract that we got, and we're really pleased with it. And also, lastly, I'd like to thank the citizens of Merrimack for coming out to vote, and who took the time to vote and showed us all their support for it. We really appreciate it, and we just want to thank you all again.
Great. And thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight. Certainly, it's nice that it's still light out, actually. And anyways, thanks again. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is the Merrimack High School graduation and end-of-year update. I'd like to welcome Sharon Putney, Allison Huckins, Lucas Woods, and Peter Bergeron.
Good evening. I want to thank the school board for allowing us the opportunity to be here tonight to present information in more details regarding our upcoming Senior Week activities. I want to publicly thank our senior class advisors, Luke Woods and Allison Huckins. Allison is here with us tonight, for their leadership this year in helping to create opportunities to celebrate this incredible senior class. Thank you also to the senior representatives who are here tonight. They will help explain some of the Senior Week events that are going to happen, and I'll give you their names, but this isn't necessarily the order in which they'll be speaking. The seniors that are here are Katie Selby, Gary Menon, Maeve Jackson, Andrea Hunt, and Lauren Wandell. And we so much appreciate that the students are here to help kind of lay out and provide these details for you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Allison Huckins, one of the senior class advisors.
Thank you so much for inviting us here. First, we're going to have Maeve Jackson come up and speak.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Again, my name is Maeve Jackson. I'm the senior class president at Merrimack High School. Tonight, we're going to be discussing our senior festivities as well as graduation for the graduating class of 2021. We wanted to kickstart this presentation by acknowledging our theme throughout the evening, which is safety, unity, and tradition. So while we are in the middle of a pandemic and have been faced with these unprecedented times, we do want to carry out these same traditions that we have in the past for previous graduating seniors, while also acknowledging that we must come together as one and keep everyone's safety and health in mind. So the first thing that we're going to be presenting is our presented plan for Senior Week, which is beginning on Friday, June 4th, which is starting with our senior sign out and finishing on Friday, June 11th with a mandatory graduation practice. So you can look over this quick overview and just see what we're going to be doing throughout the week.
And hello, my name is Andrea Hunt. I am the Vice President of the Student Body at Merrimack High School. And our first event that we're going to be holding on Monday, June 7th is the movie night. It's going to be socially distant on the football field where we have snacks and drinks will be provided. And it's just a good way to get all of the seniors included socially distancing and safely, but also just a good way to congregate and end out the year on a great note.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Selby and I am the senior class secretary, and I'll be talking to you guys about the senior service day. So at the beginning we will start off with a senior breakfast, and then we will head outside so we can clean up the grounds around the high school, and then we'll have students get their shovels, and we're going to plant some trees. And that was coordinated by the Gardening Club, the Merrimack Student Council, Eversource, and the Wildcat Subcommittee. And then after that, we will all meet with our groups and go to our designated community assignment to help our community, and then we'll come back to the high school and go to the barbecue at the American Legion.
Hello everybody, I'm Gari Menon and I'm the student body president, and today I'll be talking a little bit about the Hawk Walk. So all the kids who have attended Merrimack High School throughout their education career here in Merrimack will meet at the gym to collect their cap and gowns, and then students will take either buses to Thornton's and Reed's, or students like myself will go to Master Cola. We can just walk there, and then there will be some activities conducted, just to keep everything fun and a little nostalgic. And then students who didn't attend Merrimack schools growing up can either go, pick a school with their friends and go there, or they can join us later for the mandatory graduation practice. Thank you, guys. All right, so next up, I'm going to talk to you about our graduation plan. So first, on Friday, June 11th, we are going to be having a mandatory graduation practice. That's very normal for us. We're going to do our lineup and get everyone ready to go. And then later that evening, from 3 p.m. till 8 p.m., we're going to have the 3 graduation trellises set up in front of Merrimack High School. So families who may be concerned about crowds can come that evening and take photos with their graduate. So that will just be an option. Those trellises will be out there all evening, and families can just show up whenever they're able, if they want to. And then we move on to graduation, which is going to be at 9 a.m. on Saturday, June 12th, with a rain date of June 13th. So the key points for the day are that all the seniors kept talking about was they just all want to be on the field together. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have the entire student body, senior student body on the field on either side of the stage like normal. Last year we had boxes on the field, and we had 10 families at a time come through. We plan to increase that number to 24 families at a time. And then once the students in their wave receive their diplomas, they're going to go back to their seats. They're all going to be standing. They'll turn their tassel, sit back down, and then the families in those boxes have choice. They can either move to the bleachers to watch the rest of the ceremony. They can just exit the field and just wait out in front of the school if they don't want to be on the bleachers with maybe a crowd of people, depending on how many people decide to stay. Or they can just leave the high school if that's what they want to do and go back to their houses or whatever. Maybe they're getting ready for a graduation party. So we tried to offer choice in all this chaos. And then once the waves are all through, the students will still all be on the field together, and then we will do the traditional beach ball toss at the very end of the ceremony. And so I'm going to move into some diagrams. So our plan would be to have scheduled times, and we haven't worked those all out yet, for when we're going to have the waves come through. And this is similar to last year. And the first wave will have all the top 10 and the speakers will be in that first wave. So all the speeches are going to be live, and the graduation will be taped. And so they'll all be on the field. And so this is going to be where the guests are waiting. So as the second wave comes in, they're going to be waiting here kind of on deck. And then we're going to bring them down here, and we're going to arrange them in their box order. So we'll be ready to move them onto the field. And then this is what the field's going to look like. So as you can see, it's a pretty traditional setup. We're going to have faculty in the tent, and then the guys on either side of the stage, and then those yellow boxes represent the 24 family boxes. And so we were not going to be doing tickets this year. We were just saying you have a 13 by 13 foot box, so as many people as you feel like you can comfortably fit, and we think 10 to 15 max is a good number for that. The families will be right down on the field. Last year, the feedback was that families really liked the fact that they were so close to the stage during graduation. So they'll be able to do that again, and then, as I said, once the wave's over, they can exit and they can go up to the bleachers if they would like to stay for the rest of the ceremony. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions from the board? Shannon?
So I know you mentioned that the speeches will be first, so at the end of the speeches, will people be told at this time, go queue up to your box?
So the speeches will take place during the first wave. So the first 24 graduates and their families, like,
We'll get the speeches.
well, all the graduates will be on the field. And so that's why we did that, because the speeches are really for the students, right? So all the seniors will be on the field, and so it's just gonna be like normal. We start out graduation with speeches. And so it's just those first 24 families will be there to see the speeches happen live. But it is going to be taped, and so then when it's played back, people can go back and watch the speeches. I know last year, I believe they were pre-recorded, but.
And then what wasn't brought up, I understand, like, the band is playing, maybe the chorus usually sings. Are those things happening as well?
Yes, the band is going to be there. I think there was some question on the chorus.
There's like a select chorus that's going to be there as well.
Okay, select chorus.
Mhm.
And then when will they be? Because I think that's for everybody, as far as, for some families, it'll be their last time seeing their child play in school. So, I don't know, do you know when they will be playing?
So I know that the band is going to be playing the national anthem in the beginning, and what we haven't figured out yet is at what point those students are going to be playing. Usually they do, besides doing pomp and circumstance, which they will do as the students all come in, then they always have a piece, and we haven't quite decided yet. We're still working out that detail around when exactly the band is going to be playing that piece. So we're not quite sure yet, but we hope to be able to provide that information.
Excellent, but that would ideally be at a time when all families would be able to watch and not be queued up along the facilities.
So we are going to try to figure that out, whether or not we can have some space so that if parents are able to come and then before their wave, we're trying to figure out the logistics on that piece still, but we will provide some information soon.
Great.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question on the same vein. And what if some families just wanted to sit through the whole ceremony? Would they be allowed to sit in the bleachers and just take it in rather than not going to the box and then going to the bleachers? Like, could they
Yep.
just say, we're just gonna camp out here on the bleachers and we're fine with that? Would they be allowed to do that?
There should be plenty of room on the bleachers if there are family members that want to stay in the bleachers and not come down into the box.
Okay. Lori, did I see your hand up?
So I guess my question is, we still have time to vaccinate students. Like the Nashua School District just vaccinated 16-year-olds all the way through. So the students now they're looking at 12-year-olds. So if we were able to get students vaccinated, maybe we could, open up graduation and allow more people to attend.
So what was interesting, and Allison kind of spoke to this a little bit, is that feedback from last year was so interesting, because it wasn't, when we actually talked about this in our meetings, it wasn't just about having everybody there in the bleachers. It was really the fact that the parents loved the fact that they were so close that they could see their child go across the stage to get their diploma. And that just was something that we thought, we're going to take the best of, feedback that we got from last year and work that into the plan going forward, because it was really something that meant a lot to people. So I think it's, I think it was just a unanimous decision to try to have parents as close as they could to their child to see them go across the stage.
You still have the floor, Lori? Do you
No, I just wanted
Okay.
to make that point.
Jenna?
First of all, thank you so much for bringing this to everybody. I have actually a few questions and a couple comments. You said the speeches will be first, and only the first 24 families would see those speeches. What if your child is the salutatorian or the valedictorian or somebody giving a speech? Will there be a concession made for at least their parents to be able to be there to hear them speak, even if, grandma and grandpa and uncle so-and-so can't be there? if that was my kid, and it's not, but if it were, I would be really devastated to not be able to hear my child speak. I'm assuming you're making a concession for those
Yeah.
parents?
So the way the lineup works is that those people that are speaking will be in the first wave.
Oh, okay.
It's not necessarily alphabetical.
Okay.
And the same with.
I've never been to a
Yeah,
Merrimack High school.
and it's the same with like the kids who play in the band. They're not always alphabetically. They're placed in a spot where they can easily
Okay,
go.
perfect.
Yep.
Well, then that answers that question. Okay, next question is, so I know you said it's gonna be videotaped. Is there gonna be a live feed from Merrimack TV, like there was last year?
So, last year it was taped, actually.
Oh, it was.
And they because there was time in between that was downtime, they were able to condense that and make it a tape so that people could just then watch it, YouTube, Merrimack TV, to kind of put it together so that it wasn't 8 hours long. We don't expect this to be, we expect it to be, I think, what did we say, Alyssa, maybe 3 hours?
Yeah, I think 3 to 3.5.
But if you take out the, transitional times, it's going to be a lot shorter. And I guess there's also some interference with the amount of cell phones when they're trying to do a live feed, that interferes with it. So I think if we were depending just on that and it wasn't coming out, that would be a huge disappointment. So the decision was made to do the taping. They will be there. And then in really short order last year, I couldn't believe how quickly the turnaround was when that was available for families, and they will make that known that there's, I think they did a preview of it that was aired also, and so my understanding is that we're expecting that to take place as well.
Okay. My other question was, so I know that you're having the families in these groups, in these clusters. I assume that's for COVID reasons. I understand that there's, in part, you got some feedback that parents like to be close or whatever. But I assume that's not how we're doing graduation going forward outside of a COVID situation, right? Like, we're not doing graduation like this forever and ever. So obviously that model, the model we're using, is because of COVID, right? Because of that,
So I'm thinking yes and no. I think that was the original thought, was that we could have more groups, but I don't know going forward if that's, and we'll have to, future senior classes will have to take a look at that, but I think it was such a special time for those families that I wouldn't be surprised if something similar takes place in the future, where those families come down and see their students from a closer proximity than being on the bleachers, which is, quite a ways away from the actual stage that they walk across.
so I'm about to ask a dumb question, I'm really sorry. Like, the last time I went to a Merrimack High School graduation was my sister graduated, actually. That's the only one I've ever been to. So the stage faces the bleachers, or does not? Okay, all right. So I'm just trying to understand. All right, and then, so, because my concern with the groups is that you're actually going to have more COVID exposure with everybody standing in these clusters waiting in multiple different places and moving all around and all the shifting than if we had just had a normal graduation. Like, if we had a normal graduation and everybody wearing masks, considering we're outside and, people who have wanted to be vaccinated have had the opportunity to be vaccinated. To me, this is an overly complex plan that doesn't feel necessary at this point. Like, I guess I'm trying to understand why we couldn't have, if people are allowed to just go sit once they walk through, the people at the end of the line in those last few groups, they don't have that option. Although I guess you said they could come early and just sit up there. And then can they come down? Like, it just seems very...
So that piece of it, I would say, Jenna, we're still working out the logistics of that part of it, which we're talking about this week, how we would actually be able to figure that piece of it out. But I do think there's some people that, may still be uncomfortable. I think having them, in groups and people being in the box with people that they're probably, affiliated with, is going to be, fine and comfortable for people. There'll be chairs available if people want to sit, or if they want to stand, they can. So we're trying to make the accommodation for that. I would say that a piece that we still need to work out is what you're talking about the logistics of if somebody wants to come earlier than that because they have somebody in the band playing, or they want to come and hear the whole thing, how the logistics of that are going to work. To be honest, we're still working those pieces out right there.
Okay. So, but in theory, with this plan, everybody could decide to come and watch the whole thing, and we could end up with a giant crowd. Yes?
So I would say that we're still figuring that part out. I want to make sure that I don't give the wrong impression. The original plan is that people would come at that time that they had their group come through. So that's
Okay.
the original plan.
Right.
And that if people wanted to stay, they would be able to stay. I think some of your questions are prompting me to think about the logistics of how we can maybe manage a different scenario possibly where people might want to come and spend longer. And I don't know that we have all those pieces worked out because our original scenario was the 24. And those folks would come and then they would have the option to leave or the option to stay in the stands.
Dr.
So-
McLaughlin wanted to just say a
If I could, just to add, so I do think in your question, in theory, so in theory, yes, that would mean that when you're in the wave and you can leave, you don't have to leave. I think you heard the principal say that they could go up to the bleachers, and so in theory, every family could choose to do that. So the point that you make is that by the end, you could have the family of 300 and, whatever that would be. That's true. I think the more likely reality is that that won't happen because the thing that, has been a point of debate for all year at the board is trying to find a middle ground between the various ways that people think about what's happening. And there are, in fact, people who really don't want to be in a crowd. And I would assume that those people would not be those people who would be in the stands. But if we did it the other way, and the only way to have graduation was that way, then the only way that I could see my child is to be forced to be in an environment that I actually don't want to be in. And so what we've been trying to do, throughout the pandemic is strike that balance between the feelings of people who have fewer concerns and the feelings of people who have significant concerns. And nobody is right or wrong. You feel how you feel. So I guess that's the way that I would sort of frame it and say that that's what the team has been trying to do, is strike that balance. That's what we've been trying to do since the pandemic began.
Yeah, and I think I'm not meaning for this to come off as criticism. I'm trying to understand because honestly, I'm still confused a little bit because your question was, could anybody show up at the very beginning and sit through the whole thing on the bleachers if that's what they chose to do? Granted, I'm well aware that not every family would choose to do that, but what I'm saying is if people do make that choice, we could end up with most people deciding to do that, and then do they come in their wave? Do they not come in their wave? Like, I'll just speak from my own family, right? Like, they might want to come and watch the whole thing. Grandpa, he might want to do that. But then does he come down in the wave, or does he have to stay in the bleachers because he made that choice? Like, as a parent of a senior, I think what we all want more than we want anything else is complete clarity about what is going to happen. And if you're saying that we could come early, that's fantastic, or we can't, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think what we need is clarity on those things. And like you said, maybe you didn't think of some of those things, but I think we're going to need that clarity sooner than later, because if Grandpa lives in Connecticut or whatever, he might decide to come or not. You know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to figure out how it's all going to work in a way that does minimize COVID risk for people who are not vaccinated, and also allows families the ability to see it. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be thrilled with the fact that they're, like you said, able to see their child better. But, I mean, I want to see not just my child graduate, but also the myriad kids that have been an influence in his life and been in and out of my home for 13 years. I want to see them graduate too. So I might be a person who would be inclined to sit through the whole thing, right? And so I think we just need clarity on how that's gonna work.
So Jenna, I just wanted to say, so I think that's why this meeting is really important, because, you know, we have done a lot of work. The students have been working, the advisors, we've been meeting every week and sorting out some of these details. And I think you ask good questions, all of you, and so I think that will kind of inform some of our conversations going forward. So I think that's the benefit of making the presentation, and I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah. And I do want to just say that I am glad that you're going to allow people to come early, because if you are in that last group of 24, you then don't have the option to sit and watch any other part of the graduation, right? You'd only get to see your last 24 people, right? So if you're in the first group or the second group, you could effectively sit through graduation as part of the plan. But if you're a Z or whatever, whoever comes last, you don't have that option. And so while we're giving people choice, we want to make sure we give all people choice and not just, the first groups or whatever, so.
Thank you.
I just had one more thing.
Lori?
So the only other point that I would make is that, so the graduates, the class of 2021, would be together for 3.5 hours under this. So that's a long time for those, that's a long day for them. I know they had to do it in the past, I know they have to be together. So if there was any, thought on that process, because 3.5 hours is a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say, from my perspective, is that if families have that choice, that they could come and join and watch the whole ceremony from beginning to end, and then possibly be able to go into their lineup at the right time and go through if they want to get kind of that closer view. To me, that would be ideal in the sense that they could stay and watch from the bleachers and be welcome, or that they could then show up and be able to go into their box with their family and get that close-up view. To me, seems like a good solution in the sense that for those people that are not comfortable being in the bleachers or being around other people, they can still do their lineup and go through and see graduation in their way. And, maybe they'll stand in a distance behind the bleachers, or maybe they'll find, something else. But it seems like you guys have put a lot of work into this. It seems like we're on the right track. Literally, figuratively. Sorry. Any other questions, Shannon?
It's actually a question for the students. You're having movie night, and what movie are you going to watch?
We haven't figured that out yet. I think it might be down to a class vote or something like that. I don't know yet. We usually send out these. Mrs. Huckins has been really good with these questionnaires that we fill out, so it might be down to student council picks 5 movies, and then we send out a little questionnaire to everyone on email, and then we all answer within a week or so, and it'll probably be through that.
Gotcha. And it's just for seniors, right? So not just like the event last weekend. Great.
And certainly students, feel free to respond to any of our comments as well. You put, a lot of work into this, so your voice is very important to us.
There was another comment made about how 3.5 hours seems like a long time, but I think, at least I can't speak for everyone, but for me, all 4 years of high school is obviously very hard for any senior, and you're very excited. So personally, I don't think 3.5 hours is long at all, because we're staring at our computers for 7 hours a day, doing homework and in school. So 3 hours that we get with our families and all of our peers to celebrate us, I think is great. So I think can't really put a time on that. So I think it's good.
Jenna?
So I have one last thing I would like to say, two last things I'd like to say. First of all, I do want to say that I love the fact that you're allowing graduates to bring more than just their parents and essentially, maybe 4 people. That's what I was expecting. And I think that, grandma and grandpa and Uncle Bobby are going to be, I don't really have an Uncle Bobby, but anybody, these kids that have special people in their lives outside of their families are going to be very grateful for that opportunity. So I do give you a lot of credit for finding a way to do that, because I think that's a really hard thing to do. I just want to thank also the class advisors and all of you too that have worked so hard to try to find this middle ground and try to figure out how to do this. This is, I'm sure, not what you signed up for when you signed up to be their class advisor probably 4 years ago, right? And so I just want to thank you for all your hard work and trying to make it meaningful and special for our kids.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members or students or administration? Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming tonight, and hope you guys have a nice evening. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct for New Hampshire educators. Lori Rothhaus and Diana Fenton.
So, good evening. I invited Diana Fenton. She's with the Department of Education. She's the attorney, and she's going to be discussing the Code of Ethics with our school board and public.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
If I may take 5 minutes to switch out computers, and it will probably take longer than that because I'm very old and I have state equipment. So if you want to take a break, I can just do that and then we can go back on the record if you'd like.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dana, would it
Madam
help
Chair?
if
Hi,
you
Mark.
had
Oh,
tech?
yes.
Hi, how
I
are
will
you?
take all the advice.
I thought that
sometimes
could
I
always
can
use
get.
help,
Thank
so
you.
here we go.
Cinda, did you want to go to number 12 and just do some housekeeping while she's setting up, so
Sure.
she's not feeling so rushed?
That's a great idea, Shannon. Thank you.
So let me-
I will move on to number. Okay, I think did everyone get their packets ultimately?
Yeah, I got my packet like
I
5.
did
Yeah,
not
the
get
post
my
office didn't come till
packet. Oh, we get one to
5:15.
Lori. Oh, thank you. Did Lori Peters, did you get your packet? No. Okay, so Lori Peters needs that too. Did it have the public?
There is, the pub, well, yeah.
I'm gonna let them read through this. Here's one for you, one for Lori Peters. I'm gonna move on to item number 13. Okay, it's actually number 13 I'd like to move to, which is the consent agenda. John Fabrizio.
Thank you very much. Tonight on our consent agenda, we have one resignation, and that is Sarah D., Family Consumer Science teacher from Merrimack Middle School. That's all.
Do I have a motion? Jenna? In a second, Shannon? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. That carries 500. Number 14, other. Any correspondence to come before the board? I just have a few that came to the full board. One, there were many emails that we received about graduation, mostly to have what was called a regular or normal graduation, is how a lot of the wording was laid out. We also got a couple of emails for and against, several emails, HB 544. And then we did receive an email from one of our state reps that had some concerns regarding lead in the district water. I was going to actually address this point in new business, but since I brought it up, I did bring this issue to Matt, and Matt said that he would test the water after school is out of session for the summer. And then also that students are not drinking out of the drinking fountains right now anyways because they're shut down and children have been drinking bottled water. So what Matt agreed to do is test the water and then provide those results back to the board so that any determinations can be made if necessary.
Yeah, and also I've been in contact with DES, Department of Environmental Services, And there is going to be some grant money for testing coming up shortly, so that'll dovetail nicely into if we do it over the summertime, because none of the fountains are in use, and none of them, everything's been bagged and shut off right now, has been for quite some time. So once the funding is there, we won't have to do it on the taxpayer's dime like we did back in 2017. We'll be able to, get some grant money for it. So that's kind of the plan right now.
Okay, and I'd like to thank Representative Rung for bringing that to our attention. Anyone else have any correspondence?
No, I was just, can I ask
yeah.
can I ask a question, Matt? So, the water in the drinking fountains, I know we're not using that, but in the cafeterias, are we using water, and would that water be affected?
Yes, we are using that water. That water, although it doesn't filter out lead, the initial test we did back in 2017 was, it came back no detect in the kitchen, so that wasn't an issue, so I wouldn't imagine it would be now. So, plus it's being run through the PFOA filters that we have, which doesn't really extract lead, but it might, but that's the only thing we have.
So it was tested 4 years ago and determined safe.
Yeah,
Now
and the
we'll
law
test
says you
again
have to
be
do it
sure.
every 5 years, starting in 2019, but because we did it early, our clock started ticking in 2016, 17, so we'll be doing it shortly.
Okay, thanks. Any other correspondence that the board received individually? No. Okay, any comments from the board? No. New business?
I have a couple new business.
Go ahead, Lori.
So the first thing is to see if we could run vaccination clinics for, starting with our high school students. The Nashua Public Health ran them for the Nashua School District, and they got almost 900 students vaccinated last week. So I would love to see if we could do something similar to that. And then I'd also like to, discuss at our next meeting if we are fully vaccinated and we can remove our mask at our meetings, or at least take down our mask when we talk into the microphone. You can call the Public Health Department of Nashua. They will give you a paper that shows that you're fully vaccinated, so people could actually prove that they're fully vaccinated if we wanted that paperwork. And then finally, under new business, I would like to discuss setting a date for our goals meeting with the school board so we can discuss our vision and mission for next year, and we can let the public know what that looks like as soon as possible, because I think it's really important for our teachers and community.
Thank you, and just to comment on at least a couple of those items, I will reach out to the other board members and administration regarding your request regarding taking our masks down. I don't want to put anyone on the spot if they're uncomfortable with that, but I'll reach out and if we're in a situation where everyone is vaccinated, if that's something they would be comfortable with. And then secondly, I know we've talked about the goals meeting, so I'll reach out sooner rather than later on that too, because we'll want to time it with the appointment of an interim superintendent so that we get the full benefit of a meeting. We haven't done that in the past, but I think it is good for us to come together, particularly under the current situation, to really talk about goals and vision, and certainly to really get some strategy and get our interim superintendent up to speed as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that's going to fall after July 1, where it gets to be very busy summer months for people. So we'll try to look at a couple of dates that might work, and then we can see what works best, see where we can find a balance.
Cindy, could I?
Yes.
So I just want to comment on the vaccine clinics. The district is not really able to call the shots on that. Public health has to agree. We've reached out to them before, and they did not agree to house a Merrimack-based clinic. We had the one at Fidelity, but that wasn't through public health. So we have made that offer, that request before. We'll do it again, but I just want everyone to know that we're not able to, we can't demand that they come. So we certainly have made that request in the past, and we'll make it again. And just relative to goals, I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion even tonight about that. I just would say that I'm hoping that some of the work that we've done as recently as several meetings ago when we had Cast and Bill Wilmot and come and talk about reimagining Merrimack, that was exactly the visioning, and we have a lot of teams working on that, right now. That was just a presentation just not that long ago. As you recall, Bill Wilmot was here. So I just would imagine that, you would want to incorporate that into the fullness of your thinking as you set that meeting, because, a lot of that work has already begun, particularly for, last year. And as I say, we shared some of that with the board just back in, I forget when it was, late March or early April. So in any event, I just wanted to kind of put that out there as just another factor to help, the tools in the toolbox. So that's all. Thanks.
Any other new business? Okay. And Diane, are you ready? Are you all set? Okay, then we will go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Just let me take another back and that handout over mine. So thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come to Merrimack for a multitude of reasons, one of which is Buckley's chocolate chip cookies, which I'm addicted to, sadly, but true. So thank you for having me. Merrimack is always a very nice place to come to, and I've enjoyed working with your superintendent on some issues in the past, so it's really nice to be back here. So my name is Diane Fenton. I'm an attorney, but I am also the chief of the governance unit.
Excuse me, if you could just turn on the microphone by just pressing the green, and maybe just start over with the intro so it goes to the public.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a lawyer, so I like to be heard loud and clear, so I appreciate that opportunity. My name is Diana Fenton. I'm an attorney with the Department of Education. My role at the department is chief of the governance unit, and we oversee educator misconduct issues. And I had the opportunity to work on the Code of Conduct, which you have before you in this booklet, that the department produced in 2018. And so when we talk about the Code of Conduct, I think the natural inclination is to think, to equate it, rather, with punishment, but it's not. The Code of Conduct is about process, and that is really the key. And I want to give you a really brief history of the Code of Conduct and Code of Ethics, and then we're going to kind of talk about what it is, because I think it's really important to realize that there's a big distinction between employment and licensure. All right, so we'll very quickly go over the history of creating the Code of Ethics and Code of Conduct. And the work began way back in 2015. And that's when the PSB began to look into the possibility of creating a Code of Ethics for educators. And before I go into the land of acronyms, PSB stands for the Professional Standards Board. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a group of educators who get together at the Department of Education, and they talk about standards for the field. And so there are all sorts of subgroups. So there might be a math group for the PSB, English, social studies, what have you. I think as a good caveat, I always tell people that I'm not from the field of education. I'm a former criminal prosecutor, but I am a product of New Hampshire public education. So, and in 2016, then Commissioner Berry created the Ethics Task Force, and she really wanted to focus on this issue of creating a code of ethics for educators. So in the fall of that year, the task force began its work on the Code of Ethics. At the same time, on a parallel track, if you will, House Education introduced a bill, House Bill 210, which would have required the Department of Education to create a code of conduct. And so in April of 2017, House Bill 210 was signed into law. So in 2017, the task force, which had finished its work on the Code of Ethics, then pivoted, if you will, to begin its work on the Code of Conduct. In large part, the groups maintained consistency in terms of membership, but naturally some people dropped off, other people joined in. So in the summer of 2018, the State Board accepted the Code of Ethics, and in November of that same year, the State Board adopted the Code of Conduct. I want to highlight the change in language really quickly for you. I said accepts the Code of Ethics and adopts the Code of Conduct, and the reason for the difference in that word is the Code of Ethics was not mandated by law. So the State Board couldn't adopt it, but it could accept it. The Code of Conduct, however, was required pursuant to House Bill 210, so the Board of Education went through its process to formally adopt the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct and the Code of Ethics was a true collaboration with our stakeholders and our partners. We had NEA participate, AFT, as I mentioned before, the PSB, the School Administrators Association, CTE, which is Council for Teacher Education, Superintendent's Association was there. It really was a great working partnership with a lot of different stakeholders. And it was really fascinating to hear everyone's viewpoint about how this would affect the field and be a part of the field. So this is the statute. It was House Bill 210, as I mentioned, but when it translates into law, they put it into a chapter. So it's in Chapter 21N. And this little cutout that you see has these 4 principles that the law culled out, if you will. And so it was responsibility to the education profession and educational professionals. B is responsibility to students, responsibility to the school community, and responsible and ethical use of technology as it relates to students, schools, and other educational professionals. So the task force took those 4 principles. We just numbered them instead of doing it by the alphabet. And you will see them not only in the Code of Ethics, but then they are mirrored in the Code of Conduct, just for consistency purposes. Typically, when the legislature creates laws, they will also give the Department of Education rulemaking authority. And for those of you who are not familiar with that process, and I was not familiar with it as an attorney when I transferred to the Department of Ed, I can just quickly tell you that sometimes what the law does is build the framework of the house, and then the rules are really kind of the furnishings and the decor within the house. And so if you ever go onto the Department of Education's website, you will see lots of rules for lots of different areas that the Department of Education governs. And that is pursuant to our rulemaking authority that the legislature grants us. And so as part of House Bill 210, we had the obligation to then create the rules, which is this booklet in front of you, the Code of Conduct. And you'll see those 4 principles that I mentioned earlier in House Bill 210. Again, we translated letters into numbers, but then there's an additional section there, and that is the duty to report. And we're going to talk about all those principles as we go through the Code of Conduct. So the difference between the Code of Ethics and the Code of Conduct, as a practical matter, the Code of Conduct is enforceable, which means that the Department of Education, which issues a teaching credential, can take action upon that teaching credential. So it is kind of the stop sign. It is the bare bones standard of care that we expect from the field. So the way it was explained to me, which I liked, was if you go through that stop sign and a police officer sees you, you might get a ticket for that infraction. Whereas the Code of Ethics recognizes that educators are in a very difficult profession. And they deal with issues every day with children coming up to them with all sorts of issues. And the Code of Ethics recognizes that you're constantly making these decisions, these ethical decisions, and it gives you that guidance. I can just tell you, as my perspective as an attorney, we are governed by a very strict Code of Conduct and a Code of Ethics. And it's interesting to me that most of our interactions are at arm's length. Our transactions are at arm's length with our clients. And yet teachers have the opposite. They are there working hand in hand every day with the people that they serve. And yet, before 2018, they didn't have documents that would help them navigate those sometimes very difficult waters. So we were hoping that the Code of Ethics and the Code of Conduct would serve as a benefit to the field. So the question becomes, who is this document applicable to? The Code of Ethics is applicable to all educators and all school personnel. It's very broad because it is aspirational in spirit. Whereas the Code of Conduct is a little more narrowly tailored. It is applicable to credential holders and only credential holders. And the term credential is defined on page 9 of the booklet in front of you. And so one of the questions we always ask when someone reports a suspected allegation of a violation of the Code of Conduct, we always have to ask the question, is this person a credential holder? Some paraeducators are not required to be credentialed, and so sometimes, people will call us and say, what about the janitor? What about the school bus driver? They're not credentialed by the Department of Education, so they would fall outside of that realm. And why is this important? I guess at the end of the day, it is all about child safety. And child safety is not a zip code issue, as we all know very well. It's not to be determined by zip code. And what we've seen historically is that if a district, and although I'm here speaking with Merrimack, I'm not referring to Merrimack when I talk about districts. So I just want to be clear about that. When we see a district deal with a possible educator misconduct issue, and they do it on their own, and they don't include the Department of Education, what we've seen happen is if I'm an educator and I'm inappropriate around children, and I suddenly am under investigation, I might resign, I might be terminated, whatever the case may be. And the minute I leave that district, that superintendent no longer has jurisdiction over me. None. It's an employment issue. And that individual, and again, this is historically, we have seen this pattern, that individual might then go to another district. And the superintendent from, let's say, District A, again, no longer has jurisdiction over that individual. However, we have found that when a district works hand in hand with the Department of Education, here's the strength the Department of Education brings in. Whereas the superintendent only has oversight and jurisdiction over employment matters, it is the Department of Education that has oversight over the credential. And it is that power that allows the Department of Education to track that person statewide. Let me explain it another way. I always use myself as an example because who doesn't love picking on a lawyer, right? So I am an attorney. I work for the state of New Hampshire. I am licensed by the New Hampshire Bar. There are many things every day that I'm sure irritate Commissioner Edelblut. That was actually supposed to be funny because this is being televised. All right, there we go, much better. So Commissioner Edelblut might say, you know what, Diana, I heard your really bad jokes at the meeting last night. This is not working for me, right? I'm going to terminate your employment. And I can go somewhere else, presumably, and work as a lawyer, right? I could go to another state agency. I could go into private practice. I could go work for whatever, I don't know, doing something lawyers do, right? I can still work as a lawyer. However, if my actions were so egregious as to call into question the integrity with which I hold my law license. So, for example, if I start submitting travel documentation that says, you know what, on Monday, May 18th, I didn't go to Merrimack, I went to Portsmouth, right? I went all the way out to Portsmouth, and you're going to pay me for that travel, because that's more than me going to Merrimack. Well, that all of a sudden goes to my integrity. It undercuts the integrity with which I hold that license. And that is action that should and could be reported to the New Hampshire bar. It would affect my license, my livelihood, right? So those are two very different scenarios. So the real key of the code of conduct is that there are a lot of policies, employment policies, that the Department of Education will not get involved in, period. I always tell educators, if it is reported to me that you are violating the dress code, I assure you, I promise you, I don't care. I don't care. That is a superintendent issue. That is an administration issue, right? It's an employment issue. However, if it is reported to the Department of Education that your actions concern the safety of a child, that is where the department will get involved. That is where the code of conduct comes into play. And so the way I describe it quite succinctly is simply this. The department's scope is much narrower. It's narrowly tailored. I don't care about dress code issues, right? So the types of things that are going to pop on my radar are a lot narrower than what would pop on a superintendent's radar, okay? But my jurisdiction is much broader. Because unlike a district, my jurisdiction is statewide. And that is the critical key component. So if a district has an individual who's under investigation, and that individual says, you know what, I'm going to resign before this becomes a big deal, I'm going to resign, the superintendent is like, okay, well, I mean, what else are they supposed to do? They accept that resignation, that person leaves, they're no longer in their jurisdiction, but they remain in the department's jurisdiction. And that's where we kind of have that handoff. And that's why I've always said, when it comes to matters of child safety, the department and the district are stronger together than we ever are apart, period. So, and that's really the bottom line. Child safety is not a zip code issue, and if we have behavior that we don't want in, I'll pick on Conway because that's where I grew up. If we have behavior that we don't want in Conway, then we don't want it in Peterborough, right? And we don't want it on the seacoast. We don't want it anywhere because it's about child safety. So, once again, Code of Ethics is guidance. It is aspirational in nature, and it is a code of conduct that is actionable. It establishes the lowest standard of care, but it is only actionable against credential holders. It is applicable on or off duty, but there's a catch to that. There's a caveat. In order for it to be applicable off-duty to off-duty conduct, and this was a concern from the stakeholder group and the field in general. And it's sometimes hard to kind of make that transition in your head that, gee, my actions might affect my profession even when I'm off the clock. It's applicable off-duty, however, the department would have to prove a nexus between the individual's actions and their ability to, A, remain effective in the classroom, and B, remain safe around children. Okay, so we would have to meet that nexus. So when we say it's applicable on or off duty, it's a very broad statement. And so it does come with that caveat that the department has a burden to meet. Again, because the Code of Ethics and the Code of Conduct they really are two very different documents. They are in the same booklet, but they're very different. And you're going to see that in the language. So in the Code of Ethics, this is just an example. When communicating with students, utilizes social media responsibly, transparently, and primarily for the purposes of teaching and learning. That's fantastic guidance. That's great language, but it's not actionable because it's very subjective. Because my idea of utilizing social media responsibly might be very different from yours. And how can I prove otherwise? Whereas the Code of Conduct is a lot more narrowly tailored. An educator shall not engage in harassment, stalking, or bullying via electronic media. That's fairly clear. And the department has the opportunity to prove that. It's not subjective. Again, employment versus licensure is the critical distinction. Okay, that's where the line is. And sometimes it's very clear, and sometimes it gets a little murky. But as I mentioned earlier, the department's role is broader in jurisdiction. Whereas Mark, you knew I was going to pick on you eventually. Whereas Mark only has jurisdiction over his district, the department has jurisdiction statewide. And that's the critical distinction. And that's where the partnership comes in handy. Because where his jurisdiction ends, the department's jurisdiction steps in. However, as stated before, the types of concerns and issues that cause us to pay attention, the Department of Education, are much narrower in scope. And I'm going to give you some examples as we go on that really highlight that. So, for example, we had a situation, and this was a case that was publicized, so I'm not talking about anything that I shouldn't be talking about, anything that's confidential. There was a situation a few years ago that involved employees of a district going into court testifying on behalf of an individual who had been convicted of some sexual assault crimes. I don't recall the exact nature of those crimes, but they were against a child, against a student. And there was a lot of outcry from the public about those educators, those individuals. I am very proud to say that the Department of Education did not take any action on those credential holders. And the reason I'm proud to say that is because, as far as the department was concerned, although we didn't like that behavior, those individuals had a First Amendment right to go into a public forum, a courthouse, and speak their opinion. Was it an employment issue? Yes, it was. There were employment repercussions. There were policies that were violated. There were issues. But it did not become a credentialing matter. And so the department made the right call at the time, although I will share with you that I did spend my summer fielding many, many angry phone calls from parents who strongly disagreed with our analysis. But we stood behind what we had, the decision we had made. We had another case. We had a phone call from a district that was reporting that one of their educators was an adult film star. And when we looked into the case, I had thought that it would have been kind of something that had been done in this person's past, but it was not. This individual was an educator, and at the same time she was an adult film star. She had two very separate parts of her life, and they were very separate from one another. And she had different names for different things, and she kept them separate. And she made it very clear to me that she enjoyed both aspects of her life, and that she would never, ever do anything that would ever harm a child. And she really enjoyed being an educator. And she was very proud of being an educator. And the district took their action. I believe they terminated that individual. The department felt that this did not rise to the level of a credentialing issue. It was an employment matter. And so no action was taken on that credential. So I give these examples to show a little bit of the analysis that we go through. And I will give some more examples as we go through the PowerPoint. And at this point, I do want to say, if you have any questions, please feel free to have me stop talking, which is sometimes hard for a lawyer to do. So if you have questions as you go along, please just let me know and I can address them. Okay? So that kind of sets out the outline in which, the world in which we work, right? So this is the analysis, and I apologize, even my 9-year-old son made fun of me for this graphic, but it kind of, there are all these separate entities, but they do touch upon one another. And it's kind of like a Venn diagram. Sometimes they're going to bleed into one another, right? Just because it's an employment issue doesn't mean that it doesn't affect the code of ethics. Just because it's an employment issue, it might also become a code of conduct issue. I'm going to hop back to that example I just gave of the educator who was also had a career as an adult film star. Someone asked me, gosh, don't you think that could become a code of conduct issue? I said, sure. Does it have the possibility? Yes, it could. Could it become a code of ethics issue? Yes. But that's for every issue that we deal with. Every issue we deal with, I think, has that possibility to kind of bleed into the other area. Absolutely. So, as I mentioned before, we have those 4 principles, and the way this booklet is set up is the first half of the booklet is the code of ethics. And you're going to see those same 4 principles, same names, same titles. And then on page 8, it switches into the code of conduct. And we start with our purpose and our definitions, and then on page 11, we go into principle 1. I am not going to sit here and read the code of conduct to you. I'm not going to do that to you at 8 o'clock at night, I promise you. But what I am going to do is give you kind of a 10,000-foot overview of what the principle contains and some examples. And I will leave it to you to kind of read through the code of conduct in your own time in more detail. And if you want more booklets of the code of conduct, I am the only human being that I know of who drives around with a box of them in my car. So please feel free to take as many as you'd like. Sure.
I'm interrupting now to ask a question because my question is actually right directly about that. Because how do educators get a copy of this? Like, are they given it? Have they given it at a specific point?
Mark, go ahead.
Yep, so I want to thank Diana, because although you didn't drive them to Merrimack, but we put in a request back in 2018, and we got thousands, well, not thousands, but hundreds and hundreds, and right then, and they were distributed to all our teachers back in 2018, so they all have them.
I ask because I literally just got my credential in the last week.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I didn't get a copy of it, and so I thought maybe like it would just arrive in my mailbox, but I guess maybe when you get employed, then you go and get it from your employer.
And then we also just had a district staff meeting where all teachers in the district gave up their staff meetings for for the month, and then they all came together to the high school, and we had a presentation also on that. So.
Do we also give them to new employees
Yes.
as they come into the district as
Yes.
part of the orientation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
You know, I appreciate that question. The department, as I mentioned earlier, we pass a lot of rules. Every year we're passing rules, and we put them on our website. But the concern we had about this particular set of rules is that this directly affects someone's credential. And because of that, we felt that it was unfair to the field to put them on our website, although they are on our website, but to exclusively put them on our website, send out an email and a TA to the field and say, oh, by the way, take a look at this. That would not be a fair ask of the field. And so we printed, I want to guess, 30,000 of these. And we distributed them every way we could. Merrimack was fantastic. One of the first requests we got was from Merrimack. To have these and to distribute them. So we have worked on distributing them statewide, and we continue to do so on a kind of a rolling basis. So I really appreciate that question. Oh, I apologize.
John?
Go ahead.
Just that one of the reasons why Merrimack, just historical is important about why. Why were we one of the first, why we're part of this? I'm a former chair of the Professional Standards Board, and I was in 2015 when this was first presented. And that's how I know Diana and doing that work when she first came onto the department. And then I spent 6 years in that board. Then Kim Yarlott has been there the 6 since then. And before that was Frank Hoyle, Marge Chaffer. There's been a long line of Merrimack educators who sat on the PSB. And that's kind of part of this history, why when it came along, we were part of that process all the way through. And then when it was completed, we were excited. And had Nicole Heinrich come to Merrimack and present to us, because it was something that was completion of a lot of work for a lot of years working on this. So, thank you.
Yeah, and Merrimack certainly has a piece of ownership of it and a lot to be proud of in that. So again, I'm not going to read over in detail all these principles, but if you look at page 11, that's where we have principle 1. And that is the responsibility to the education profession and educational professionals. So failure to report if the individual is arrested for RSA 18913A section 5 offense, and before you think, oh no, she just went lawyer on me, there is a paper in front of you that sets out all these offenses. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with RSA 18913A, That is the statutory provision that governs criminal history background checks for employment. Interesting to note that the background check is part of employment. It is not part of the credentialing process. However, moving forward, the department has gained statutory authority to work the background check in as part of the credentialing process, so that the department will proudly say to the field, this individual does not have an offense which would make them unemployable, right? The department felt, why would we license someone who might be unemployable to the field? That does not help the field. So moving forward, we hope to achieve that. But at this current time, it is RSA 189.13a, Roman numeral 5, that governs these offenses that would prohibit employment as an educator statewide. And what I did, if you look at the statute, it just lists out the other statutory references to the criminal code. And I found that to be horribly unhelpful. So I created what I call my little cheat sheet, and I list out all those offenses. And some of the highlights are, first and second degree murder, sexual assault, child pornography, kidnapping, incest, anything directly related to child safety and child harm. This current legislative session, there is a bill that looks like it's going to pass, although I hesitate to say that because I might have just jinxed it, but it looks like it's well along its way, that would amend that list to add in the offense of human trafficking as well. So a failure to report for any one of those offenses. I think it's really important to note and to point out that there are a lot of offenses that are not on that list. So DWI is one that always comes up, right? Theft is not on that list. Assault, criminal trespass, criminal mischief, they're not on that list, right? Negligent homicide, they're not on that list. That list is narrowly tailored for offenses that relate to children and safety of children. Falsifying professional qualifications is a violation under Principle 1. Sometimes we have had those issues happen. We did have an individual who falsified a college transcript, right? So we had to look into that. That would be a code of conduct violation. Unlawful possession of a drug. I have two instances that I want to share with you. One was a public case. There was an educator that was found to have heroin in her desk drawer at her school. And the department took action upon her credential. The reason for that is that was brought into school, on school property, and students, in theory, had access to it. We don't believe any students did gain access to it, but those are the kind of concerns that are directly going to get the attention of the Department of Education, right? Again, child safety issues. We had another matter that was brought to our attention, reported to us, in which an educator sadly had had an overdose at his home. There were no students around. He did survive that overdose, and he was getting the help that he needed to address those underlying issues. The department did not take any action on that individual's credential. We felt that that was handled appropriately by the district, and we just worked with the district to make sure he got the services that he needed. And again, I want to kind of highlight those differences, right? Employment versus licensure. Possessing or being under the influence of drugs or alcohol on school premises or school-sponsored activity where students are present, I will share with you, when we rolled out the Code of Conduct, I knew that we would get a lot of questions about how we were going to interpret it and some concerns. And one of my favorite stories, kind of near and dear to my heart, because it is one of my favorite assistant superintendents, he called me and he said, I really have a concern about this provision right here, this possession or being under the influence of alcohol or drugs on school premises or school-sponsored activity. And he said, because our superintendent throws a really good Christmas party every year. It's like a really good Christmas party, and I don't think we can have it anymore reading this. And I said, well, okay, that wasn't that wasn't the reason we passed the Code of Conduct. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, is the Christmas party held on school grounds? And he said, no, it's at the superintendent's house. Okay. I said, it's not sponsored by the school, is it? He said, oh, no, not at all. I said, you don't invite students, do you? And he said, no. I said, well, then I don't see it falling within this. And I said, it sounds like a really fun party, and I'd love to be invited. And there's this beautiful long pause, and he said, well, I don't think that's going to happen. So we, to this day, laugh about it. And then he invited me out to the school, and I brought that story up in front of the superintendent, who had the really good party. And I turned to him and I said, so can I come to your party? And the same long pause, and he said, no, you can't. But from that example, we got other hypotheticals, and that's the reason I bring it up. So this particular district happens to be near a really nice pub, and so the questions were, well, gosh, what if I go to this pub and have dinner on a Friday night and have a drink, and then can I swing by the high school basketball game? And I said, well, let's talk about it. Can you? I said, are you under the influence of alcohol if you have a drink or 2 drinks with dinner and go to the basketball game? Probably not. Probably not. I said, I don't think it's a code of conduct violation. I said, but as a product of New Hampshire public education from a small town up north in Conway, does everybody know you? Yes. Is everyone going to come over and talk to you when they see you? Because you're their teacher. Yes. Is it the best decision you can make? I don't know. It's not for me to decide. Right? Not for me to decide. It's for you to decide within your own professional boundaries and the code of ethics. But it's not a code of conduct issue. I've had a lot of educators early on when we first rolled out the code of conduct. I had an educator come up to me and she said, can I drink a beer at a 4th of July party? And I said, you look young, but I'm guessing you're over 21. I think you can. Is there more to your question? And she goes, well, will I get a sanction from the Department of Education? And I said, I don't know if you've heard this, but we're not the fun police. I said, we're not going to be hanging out at your barbecue waiting to bust you. If you want to have a beer at a friend's party, go right ahead. And then she elaborated on her hypothetical, and she said, well, I'm a kindergarten teacher, and my child's in kindergarten, so a lot of my mom friends, I have their children in class. I said, oh, okay, now we're getting to the heart of the issue. I said, tough scenario. I said, I'm really glad you brought this up. I said, would it be a code of conduct issue? Probably not. Always depends on the facts. Always fact dependent. I said, but could it reflect on your professionalism? Potentially. Could it bother some parents? Potentially. I said, it's a really good thing to think about. But is it going to be a code of conduct issue? Probably not. Code of conduct really is for those very extreme, egregious cases where, again, child safety is called into question. So, moving along to Principle 2, which you will find on page 12, responsibility to students. Failure to provide appropriate supervision of students pursuant to local policy. And there, we had to reference local policy because we needed to have a clear standard. So we're going to go back to the local school policy on that. I know at the time of creation of the Code of Conduct, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of concern from the field about, well, gee, if I step out into the hallway to take a phone call or grab a drink of water, am I going to be zinged for that? And that certainly wasn't the intention. I know the discussion was about really an abandonment of duty, right? Just like absolutely just leaving your class and not coming back. And that's why we put in that pursuant to local policy. Furnishing alcohol or illegal drugs to students, engaging in sexual activity with a student, soliciting participation in a sexual relationship. It is interesting to note and critical to note that for this provision, the term student has a different definition. The term student is defined as being up to 10 months after graduation. I want to share with you that the stakeholder group spent an enormous amount of time talking about this provision, this idea, this concept. It came from the field that there were concerns about, you know, and again, I'm just kind of paraphrasing what was expressed to the stakeholder group from the field, was that, gosh, you know, these students suddenly graduate and some educators will provide them their cell phone number, and sometimes they end up having a relationship by July or August, and it just, you know, it's something that's always happened, and a lot of people just accept it or look the other way or what have you. But the field expressed just a concern about that. And we looked at other states, and other states that had adopted a code of conduct for educators. And a lot of states had defined the term student as some period of time after graduation. We saw 3 months. We saw 6 months. And it was the stakeholder group that took a very aggressive stance here in New Hampshire and said, you know what, we're going to go to 10 months. 10 months after graduation. We're going to give it, the thought was, and I think actually it was Nicole Highmark's idea, the thought was, let's do an academic year. And that's how we came up with 10 months. If we flip to principle 3, and again, we really are doing a 10,000-foot overview of this code of conduct, talking about responsibility to the school community, we start with accepting gifts or favors where there might be an actual or an appearance of a conflict of interest. And I want to share with you that it was so interesting to me, switching from my old job, I was a criminal prosecutor with the Attorney General's office, to the Department of Education. As a criminal prosecutor, I will share with you that we were not allowed to accept anything, absolutely nothing, for our work as a prosecutor, and that was the right rule. Not only would that affect our employment, it would also be reported to the bar. It was a very, very strict rule at my former office, and I agreed with it very strongly. And I will share with you the story that I often share, which is after, near the end of the first homicide trial that I had the privilege to prosecute, the mother of the victim, the mother of the young man who had been murdered, approached myself and my trial partner in the parking lot of the courthouse. And it was right around Christmas time, and we were wrapping up trial. And she's a very kind woman, and she had made us a cake. She had baked us a cake as a thank you for all our hard work. But the rule in our office was very clear. We could not accept anything. And so we had to say very clearly, and of course we're lawyers, so we don't have a lot of social graces. We're like, no cake. And we had to make it very clear that we were not accepting her gift, and we had to walk away. Although I always do tell people that if ever I was to lose my law license, I would like it to be for the fact that I ate cake. I think that would be a great explanation for why I'm no longer a lawyer. I finally made you laugh. That's a good sign. There we go. So I went from this very, very strict, rigid rule to the Department of Education, and recognizing that the field of education is just different, right? And my mom is a lifelong educator, and yes, when I told her I was becoming a lawyer, she cried, and to this day tells me how much she doesn't like lawyers. But it is so much a part of her culture, education's culture, and in no way, shape, or form did we want to change that. We did not want to affect that at all. But what we wanted to do was highlight for the field that sometimes there might be a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, and kind of asking what this might mean and how it might be perceived, especially in small communities, right? So gifts of a small amount shall not be deemed a conflict of interest in any way, shape, or form. So misuse of funds for use by the school. This, at the end of the day, really is just about theft, right? It's about taking money that's allocated for one purpose and using it for another. We did, under this principle, have a very interesting scenario reported to the Department of Education. And it was an educator who had a jar or a piggy bank on her desk, and she, after lunch or after certain periods, she would always ask her students, hey, if you have any change, throw it in the piggy bank because it's for my bucket list. It's my bucket list jar. And here's all the things I want to do. And hey, if you have extra change, throw it in the jar. And it was reported to the Department of Ed, and at the end of the day, we didn't take any action on it. We left it as an employment issue. We didn't see that it fell within one of these provisions very clearly. But I will share with you, the only reason it kind of gnawed at me a little bit was that educator happened to work in a very poor community, a very notoriously poor community. And that's the only thing that really kind of ate at me a little bit, to say, you know, and I don't think it would necessarily be okay if it was in a wealthy community. I want to be clear about that. But I think that was a fact of it that was just kind of found it difficult to find that to be okay behavior. But in working with the district, we were able to resolve it because it was an employment issue, and the department didn't take any action. But I remember looking very clearly at this provision to say, is that a gift or a favor where there might be a conflict of interest, right? So we kind of struggled with that a little bit. Intentional altering or misrepresenting student assessments, results, or official school records. I've actually gotten a lot of concerns and comments on this from the union. And I guess the issue is this. The way it's been explained to me is as follows. If I'm an educator and I want to give a 0 for someone, and the superintendent says, no, we don't do that. We give 50s across the board. Educators have said, well, is that the intentional altering or misrepresentation of student records? And I said, well, that's very interesting. I said, I think if that's your policy and your policy is applied consistently and across the board, I think it falls outside of this provision. I think this provision was written with the idea that we are going to ask an educator to intentionally alter one individual's report, right? To say, well, again, I always pick on myself, Diana Fenton's son, we know where she works, we know what she does, so we're going to take him from a C to an A, right? Things like that. So again, we haven't had any issues with this, but I know that this was a very big concern from the field, so I try to address it when we talk about it. Again, and please forgive the corny graphic on this, but this question has come up quite a lot. Educators will ask me, the field will ask, what if a parent gives me a bottle of wine as a present? Am I going to lose my license for that? And I think the answer is, the short answer is no. I don't think there's anything within the Code of Conduct that prohibits that. We recognize that people give gifts to educators, and again, as I stated previously, we don't want to change that beautiful part of the field. However, what I always say is, you have to recognize where you work. You work with children. And so I think it behooves the educator to act appropriately with that gift, whatever it is, and to put it in their car, lock it up, put it away, whatever the case may be. You know, I expect people to exercise their professional judgment appropriately if they were to do that. And I always give the example, I think it's this, not that anyone ever gives me presents because I'm a lawyer and nobody likes me, but I said if in theory someday someone did, it would be the same thing. I work on state property. We are not allowed to have alcohol on the premises. So I would inform my boss and I would go out and I'd put it in my car and lock it up appropriately. And I think the same rule applies, quite simply. Moving on to the fourth principle, and I can tell you the representative who passed this law, who passed House Bill 210, this was his big focus. He was very, very concerned with this provision in particular, and it is the responsible and ethical use of technology. Once again, we have that same unique definition of student being defined as up to 10 months after graduation in this principle and principle 2 that you saw earlier. I will share with you that when we went to write this as a stakeholder group, I really believe that this would be a very easy provision to write. And the reason I felt that is at the end of the day, you kind of think, well, gosh, and you probably have dealt with this on policy of the same issue. You're like, gosh, just don't be creepy when you email, right? I mean, that's kind of it. Like, that's kind of the rule of thumb. But it's hard to put that into a rule. It's really hard to condense that down. So what we did for Principle 4, and again, you'll find it on page 14, is this became what we call a totality test. And you're gonna see that at the bottom of page 14. It says, for purposes of this section, inappropriate communication is determined by considering, and then it lists out a bunch of factors. Because the reality is, I can't say in a rule, you know, you can send a smiley face emoji, but you can't send a heart emoji, right? You can send a icy cold emoji, but you can't send a mad face emoji, right? It's just, you can't delineate it that way. So you have to make it a totality test. You have to look at, was the communication covert in nature, right? Was someone trying to communicate with someone when they knew they shouldn't be and taking steps to hide it? Could it reasonably be interpreted as sexually explicit or romantic in nature, right? We look at the intent, the timing, the amount of the communication. And I have some examples. We had an educator who was emailing one of his students at 2 and 3 in the morning, and it was bothering her. And he sometimes used heart emojis, sometimes used smiley face emojis, and these were some of the things that he said. Please excuse the grammar. These are direct quotes. You were one of my rare accomplishments. I saw special in you from the beginning. I felt compelled to both nurture and provocatively challenge your thoughts. There is not, you know, when I tell you 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, heart emoji, and these various things, if you look at each of those pieces in isolation as a silo, it falls apart, right? If I say to you, Lori, I'm going to send you an email at 2 in the morning, you might say, I won't read it till 8, but go right ahead, right? You might not like it, but in and of itself, an email at a strange time doesn't mean that I'm acting inappropriately, right? Same thing if we were to say, you would say, you know what, the other day Diana sent me a text with a heart emoji. A little weird, but, you know, she's a lawyer, it's a little weird. You know, in and of itself, it's not going to equal anything. Same with these statements. We might not like them, but in and of themselves, in isolation, they might not get us to the goalpost. But when you put it all together, emailing at a strange time, heart emoji, and then these statements, it's a little stronger, right? And when we talked to this particular educator, we asked him about those individual pieces, and he had explanations for some of them. The 2 and the 3 in the morning, that was just his natural clock. He got up at 2 and 3 in the morning, and he did a lot of prep work. Okay, fine. Had an explanation for the heart emoji. Had some explanations for this. But again, when you put it all together, it was a lot harder to argue his way out of. All right? Again, going back to one of the cases that I mentioned earlier about individuals who went into court to speak on behalf of the educator who had been convicted of some sexual crimes against a student. It was interesting to me that when the prosecutor had to state the facts of the case that supported the plea deal, one of the facts she noted was that the relationship occurred and took place within 3 or 4 months. It was a fairly short period of time. And in that period of time, that particular educator sent over, and please don't quote me, but like 3,200 text messages back and forth to this child. And so things like that are another one of the factors that is in this particular provision. It's another thing that we look at, right, take into consideration, because it is really a totality test. There is no one factor that's going to really tip the scales. And then we talk about the 5th principle, and it's important to note that Principle 5 is not in the Code of Ethics. Keeping in mind, Code of Ethics is aspirational, it's not actionable, but Principle 5 is, and that is the duty to report. So any credential holder shall report any suspected violation of the Code of Conduct, and they are to report it up the chain of command. And what I always say to educators is they are the ultimate best advocates for children. They really are. They put to shame any lawyer, any CASA, any GAL. Teachers are the best advocates for children, period. But I always tell them, but you are the worst self-advocates. And there's always a pause, and they kind of look at me and they don't know what to say, and I say, and that's okay. That's okay, because if you were good self-advocates, you know what we would call you? Lawyers. We'd call you lawyers. That's what you would be called. And then they're like, we think you were just insulted us, but that's okay. So what I always tell them is, please, 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 when you report up your chain of command, please document it, right? Send it in an email, memo it up. I am not from the field, but I've had the privilege of coming into a lot of schools. A lot of schools have welcomed me with open arms before COVID, obviously. And there are moments during the day where it's just chaos. There's so much going on. And I said, that is not the moment to say to the principal, oh, I need to talk to you about something, right? So document it. Find that appropriate time and moment and make sure that that's clear, that you're reporting that violation. It is the superintendent who has the obligation to report to the Department of Education when there's a suspected violation of the Code of Conduct. And we've had some discussion on kind of when that timing occurs. We did not put in the book, you have to do it the minute after it's reported to you, or 5 seconds after, or 10 seconds before, because that's a bit untenable. We leave it to the discretion of the superintendent. The superintendent is in charge of that district, and the superintendent knows they have an obligation to report. But what we have found in practice, honestly, truly, is it helps both parties when the report is made, just somewhat immediately, right, close to the time the person's out on leave, because then we can work together to figure out, okay, well, who's going to take lead on this? Is this the district or is it the department? Or sometimes the department has more tools to take the lead on it. And the more we can work these cases together, the better the result is, right? Because sometimes we have skills and tools that the district doesn't have, and vice versa. So we didn't want to get into a contest in which we say, well, again, Mark, I'm going to pick on you. You have 20 minutes to report to us, and the clock starts now, because that's not your reality. But overall, we found the field to be very amenable to reporting to us and finding that it is helpful to do that and have that discussion and find out who's going to kind of take the lead and what tools we have to offer. And credential holders shall report abuse and neglect, and that's just the DCYF provision, but we wanted to make that clear and consistent and carry that over because it is so critically important. So as important as this document is, I can tell you that one of the things that I brought to the stakeholder table, and one of the things that I would often mention, was process. And that's where the 511s come into play, because here's the way that I see it as an attorney and see it as part of the stakeholder group, is I said, we can write this code of conduct. We're a smart group. We can put together a code of conduct. But I assure you that if the Department of Education does not have an appropriate process, the whole thing falls apart. The entire thing is useless. It's all about the process. And the Department of Education owes that clarity to the field, because if the Department of Education is going to put a mandate on educators to say, you have to report an alleged violation of the Code of Conduct, the reality is you will be hesitant to report if you don't believe that there is a firm process in place that will treat people fairly. So it was unfair for the department to create a code of conduct without the necessary process piece. And that's what the 511s are. And that's the document you have in front of you. That's the stapled paper. So I can tell you in terms of process, because prior to the code of conduct, I think there was questions as to, well, when do we call and who do we call and who do we talk to, right? It just wasn't clear. And that's not fair to the field. That was a failing on the behalf of the Department of Education. And so now it's clear. You call the department, you call me, you call Richard Farrell. We are in charge of investigations. Most people call Rich Farrell because, frankly, they just like him better than me, and that's okay. I like him better than me, too. We do what's called an initial review, and in that initial review, we go through the process that I talked about at the beginning, which is this employment? Is this licensure? One of the cases we got from a superintendent contacted me and she said, you know what, I have this newer educator and boy, she likes to tweet. And she's tweeted out some doozies. and I have some concerns about it. I put her out on leave, and she provided me with this printout of tweets. And I looked through it, and this educator, she would talk about her classes, right? She had opinions about her classes. She had opinions about her personal life. She had opinions about the school district. She had opinions about the principal and the administration. She had a lot of opinions. And she had every right to those opinions. Now, did the district have some valid concerns in the information that she was tweeting out? Absolutely. Did it violate some policies on their part? Most likely, yes. But was it a child safety issue? No, it wasn't. And did she have the opportunity to perhaps go to a different district, maybe get a different mentor, get some experience, get some coaching, and become a very effective, productive educator? Yes, I believe that she did. The department didn't take any action, right? So that's that initial review. We got some factual basis. We worked with the district. We got some information. We don't just, throw it out there and say maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We pulled some information. We reviewed it and made the determination that this was employment, okay? If an individual is placed under investigation, and that term investigation really is a term of art in the 511s, in the process piece, then that person is officially notified. And so we send a letter, a copy of which is right here, and we send that certified to the individual, and we CC the superintendent. And we send a copy to the union. Okay? And so what we say is quite simply, this letter is the official notification pursuant to our administrative rules that the Department of Ed has initiated an investigation into a complaint against you, which alleges you engaged in acts which, if substantiated, would violate the code of conduct. And then we give a factual basis to support it. And the reason we do that is the individual has a right to contest it, period. They have a right to contest it. They have a right to know what the department is alleging. And we also tell them at this time, no action's been taken against your credential. Your credential is still valid pending this investigation. And we provided a copy to the superintendent and to the union. And again, the superintendent is notified of that process. And typically what happens as a practical matter, this is not the first time the superintendent has heard of this. I cannot think of an instance in which we sent out the letter and the superintendent got it cold. And certainly if I'm wrong, I apologize ahead of time, but typically what you will see behind the scenes is there's been a lot of communication either with the superintendent directly or with the school district attorney saying, here's what we're going to do. We're going to send this out. In fact, we have a matter pending now in which I said to the district, because the district's kind of taking lead, they're doing their own investigation. I said, what will help you? When do you want me to send the investigation letter out? Do you want me to send it out now? Do you want me to send it out later? We're coordinating and working and doing a joint effort on these cases. And I said, you tell me what you want me to do, and I'm happy to oblige. So when the superintendent gets that letter, they will know that it's coming. So when we look at a case, I always like to say there are 4 options and there's 3 forms of sanction. First and foremost, we can and we have quite routinely closed out cases if an allegation is unfounded. I will share with you, we got a case from a superintendent, and he had contacted us with a case that became quite a big matter. And then moving forward, about a month later, he contacted us again. And because we had just had this case, we certainly were, very knowledgeable about that district and the superintendent. And he said, oh my gosh, I have another crazy case for you. And the allegation was that there was a track coach who was enticing the female runners on his team to run really fast, and whoever ran the fastest got to have dinner with him on Saturday night. Okay? Egregious allegation. And we investigated it top to bottom, interviewed everyone we possibly could, and the entire thing was fabricated. Absolutely no truth to it whatsoever. None. And I remember taking great pride in writing the letter to that educator and to the superintendent saying there was absolutely nothing here. It was not substantiated in any case. in any way, shape, or form. The reality is this. One of the concerns we noted at the Department of Ed was that we have to communicate with the field. If someone is placed under investigation, we have to notify them. And as a part of that, we also have to notify them if and when we close out the case. It's not fair to have these cases kind of lingering on forever and people walking around going, am I under investigation? I don't know, maybe, maybe not, right? The story I always tell is anyone familiar with the term double secret probation? Right, what movie is that from?
Animal House, based out of Dartmouth.
That's correct, nicely done. That is my father's favorite movie, and he claims that it highlights his days in Bowdoin College, which I did not go to. But I went to law school, and I learned very quickly that there is no such thing as double secret probation. Can you believe it? It's not a real legal term. It's not a legal Isn't that crazy? It's the only thing I learned in law school. It's not a thing. So we owe the field to say, we've looked at this case. You're no longer under investigation. We've closed it out. Period. We don't want people walking around going, am I under double secret probation? Right? That's not fair. That doesn't serve anyone any purpose. So we close out those cases, and more often than not, we do send out those letters. Now, we can suspend someone. We can take action for a set period of time on someone's credential, and we have done that. The amount of time depends upon the facts, and I want to assure you that when we look at these cases and we make these really hard decisions, because this is affecting someone's credential, I promise you it's not just me sitting alone in my lawyer office going, what time should I suspend this person for, right? Doing my Mr. Burns impression from The Simpsons. That's not what we do. We do these cases in a collaborative manner. Sometimes we work directly with the districts. I've had districts say to me, this is what I think would be fair, okay? Ultimately, it is the commissioner, it is the deputy commissioner, it is the investigator, and myself talking about these cases on an individual case-by-case basis. And the other thing we do is we look at what we've done in the past. Everything we do, we are held accountable for. That's called case law precedence. We are held accountable to it. So if we suspend someone for 5 months for XYZ facts, we are held to that. Because moving forward, someone has every right to say, well, what about this individual? Why are you treating me differently? And we need to explain why. And we should explain why. And I will always say to the commissioner, think about the precedents we are setting, because we will be held accountable to it, as we should be. A revocation is a permanent rescission. It is a very serious offense that results in revocation. And the example is, unfortunately, the infamous Concord case, which I know everyone is familiar with, and I hate to bring it up because I think it's been probably over talked about, but it serves an important part, right? That educator who is facing criminal charges in Massachusetts for having inappropriate relationships with girls. Interesting to note, his criminal case in Massachusetts is still pending. The department revoked his license to teach, his credential to teach. We didn't have to wait for the criminal case. We didn't want to wait for the criminal case, nor should we. We took action upon that license, and he is prohibited from ever reapplying for a credential to teach from the New Hampshire Department of Education. Yes?
A question I have, because of course you were talking about people that would resign and go to another district. Well, what happens if they turn in their license to New Hampshire and go to another state? So, I might be under investigation. I'm going to turn my license in and just agree not to teach in New Hampshire anymore. So would you still conclude your investigation so that way you would have that revocation on file? So that way it would be something that they could background check in other states?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to give you my classic lawyer answer, which is it depends, right? It's always going to depend on the facts. Is that a possibility? It is. Someone could just come in and just say, here's my license. We have not had that situation occur. And we are all about documentation, because we want to make sure that if that individual kind of pops on our radar again, we have documentation of it. We have kind of this progressive discipline that's the term the district uses, but we're kind of trying to adopt that as well. So we would do everything in our power to say, you know, until our case is closed, we will hold your license in abeyance, or we will take some kind of action. The reality is, we haven't had that happen yet. But I appreciate your question, because it gives us an opportunity to look at our process and see what we could do if that fact pattern occurs. So I'm going to go back and look at the 511s to see factually where that would fall. But ideally, we would hopefully be able to hold it in abeyance and have some kind of notation of how that was done. But I appreciate that. The other tool we had, which we did not have before the Code of Conduct was passed, is a reprimand. And the reprimand is, you know, it is between the credential holder and the Department of Education. And the way I try to describe it, it's the rumble strip on the highway, right? The rumble strip on the highway, if you're drifting or you're falling asleep, the rumble strip reminds you, oh, you're drifting out of your lane. And the reality is, not every offense results, or nor should it result, in action on someone's credential, right? We don't have to take everyone out of the classroom to address situations. And the reprimand letter, I think, is a great tool to do that. It is a notation, it is a formal notation, but a notation in that person's credential file. It does not go to employment. Now, could employment ask about it? Absolutely. But it is really between the Department of Ed and the credential holder. And the example that I will give is we had an educator during the height of the pandemic. It was reported to us by the district that she had posted a video of herself binge drinking. And what she did was she had this glass of wine and said, oh, it's quarter cup and half cup, 3/4, and then she downed it all in one fell swoop. She was a health teacher, and that's why the district was upset. And the district terminated her and referred her to the Department of Education to review it. We reviewed the video, and we had the opportunity to speak with the educator. And I will tell you that that educator came into the department, was very forthright, very honest, answered all our questions, and said, you know, I was foolish. I shouldn't have done it. I regret having done it. And I genuinely wish I had exercised better judgment. And we issued her a reprimand, and she, to this day, is the only person who will continually email me and say, thank you so much for being so nice to me and issuing me a reprimand, and was just so appreciative. And it always makes me chuckle, because most people just don't like me. So she made it very clear. She's like, thank you so much for just understanding where I was coming from, understanding that this isn't the end of the world, but did it need to be recognized? Yes, and dealt with. And she appreciated the kind of the tap back into her lane. And we actually helped her get another job. And she's doing a fantastic job at her new district and doing great. And she wanted to work with me to get the word out to other people. It was really great to work with her. So again, as I mentioned before, this is a group discussion. We listen to all points of view on this. And there are times where we listen to the district and say, what do you think should happen? So we consider the seriousness of the offense, any prior disciplinary record, the potential of harm to students, and the purpose of the rule that was violated. We go through that. All our discipline is documented in writing. Again, there is no such thing as double secret probation. We will not suddenly put a suspension in someone's file and they'll go, oh my gosh, I had no idea it was in there. It's signed by all parties. Same with a reprimand. It's all signed by all the parties involved, and it's maintained in our electronic credentialing file. We do have a list of suspended and revoked educators, and we send that list out to the districts on a routine basis. Moving forward, we are working to put it on the DOE website, where people can go on to our website and just type in a name and see if that person is valid or has been suspended or revoked. We're not there quite yet, but we're working on that. What you'll notice on our list that we send out, and that is available to the public, is we put a brief description of the reason for the action. We do not have that on our website, nor will we. It will just be kind of a yes, no, whether they're valid or not valid. We do have grounds for reinstatement after suspension, again, separate from a revocation. A revocation, by definition, is a permanent rescission. A suspension is an opportunity to get back in the field, because we do want to support our educators and address any issues of concern and support them and get them back into teaching. Again, this is just kind of a quick example of one of our agreements where we set down all the facts, what this looks like. This is a voluntary surrender and how long that suspension will be for. Everything, the goal is transparency and the goal is clarity. I will point out to you that most of the time, 9 times out of 10, if the department puts someone under investigation, that individual's credential remains valid during the time of the investigation, and that's set forth in the letter. However, there is a very small exception to that, and that is found in our ED 511s. If an individual is arrested for one of those Section 5 violations that we mentioned previously that you have on that list in front of you, the DOE has the opportunity to do an immediate suspension of that credential holder. The argument is this. The language in 189.13a says arrested or pending disposition or convicted of, right? It takes into account the arrest and awaiting trial period. It's not just a conviction. So the argument is, if this person would not be employable, why would the department continue to maintain their credential to teach? And so we've had rare occasion to use this, but on the occasions that we have, it sends a very strong message. We had occasion to use it just a few months ago when an educator was arrested for, I think, possession of child pornography and solicitation, and those were, if not all, some were Section 5 violations, and the department did an immediate suspension on that person's credential. And that, too, can help the district in terms of putting that person out on leave, supporting the district, and working with our partners. If that is done, they are notified in writing, and the superintendent is notified as well. And the credential holder is entitled to an immediate hearing within 10 days to challenge that action. So the question has always been, gosh, who do I report to at the Department of Education? And now I'm on television telling everyone what my cell phone number is. But that's the reality of it. So we want to know these cases. I had an assistant superintendent say, gosh, you seem to think about these cases all quite a bit. And I said, it's all I think about if it's child safety. I always tell everyone, you do not want me in a classroom. I do not have the patience for it. I did not inherit my mother's gift to be a teacher. I promise you that. But I'm really good at identifying child safety concerns. And so my offer to people in the field and administration and teachers is simply this. If you have a situation or a concern and you just want to, gosh, I'm not sure, I want to run it by someone, please call me. Please call me, and I'm happy to have that discussion with you. We have had people call us and say, well, you just keep it anonymous, confidential. Absolutely. And we've gotten into some dust-ups over that with the union, where we say, no, we're not going to reveal that name because that person came to us in confidence, and we really go above and beyond to try to maintain that. But the reality is this. These cases are hard. These cases are tough for any district, but they do happen. When I first started the Department of Education, I had someone say, this never happens in education, and I wish that were true. And we're so fortunate to have an amazing group of teachers here in New Hampshire. Amazing group of teachers. My son's in New Hampshire Public Education. And for the most part, it doesn't happen. But the truth is, from time to time, it does happen. And that's where the department is here to work with our partners to make sure that children are safe throughout our state. So that being said, I really want to thank you for having me here today, and for your time and your attention. And I'm happy to take any questions either now or offline.
Any questions from the board? No. Okay. Well, since we were asking them as we were going along, but really wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for taking time out of your busy night to come here and present to us, so thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you
I
very
appreciate
much.
it.
Okay, so next item is the update on the superintendent search. I just have a quick update there. The board has decided that it wants to hire an interim superintendent and go through, and has hired a search firm, which is McPherson and, Matt, help me out, somebody. My noun amnesia this late at night.
Pearson and
McPherson and, okay, so the board has hired a search firm to help us with the superintendent search, which the board plans to do in a very organized fashion, in conjunction with the community and community stakeholders and school stakeholders, and really go through a process to get a superintendent in place by July 1, 2022. Having said that, the board has also decided to work to appoint an interim superintendent that will be able to fill the role for the upcoming year, which is the 21-22 year. We will look at candidates. We're working also with HR with the oversight of Matt Chevenel to be able to get some potential candidates for that interim position. And once we see those resumes, we will put forth some interviews and get an interim in place for this next school year. Anything else that I missed that should be added? Okay, thank you. Next is item number 8 is the Two Revolutions presentation. I'd like to invite Adam Rubin up to the microphone. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'd like, we've asked Adam to come here.
Pull it up on Google, if that's okay. Sorry.
Sure. We've asked Adam to come here to outline a process that he had given us a proposal for the public so that we can get public input. One of the things that we're looking to do is work with our leadership team and administration regarding a shared vision that incorporates community input. And also the idea of Adam presenting is so that we can also open up, we can also allow community input into this process as it relates to the proposal that he's presenting. It obviously comes at a cost to the taxpayers, and we just want to be very transparent and allow him the opportunity to present his proposal and answer any questions that we have publicly.
Hi, good evening.
All right.
I'm sure everyone is a little tired at 9:30 at night,
Yeah.
but this is probably an early meeting coming out of COVID.
So we turn it over to you.
Do you guys want to take 2 minutes? Because I think we're having a tiny bit of technology.
Well, that's fine. We can move
Okay.
on, actually.
I was gonna go to the
I just
bathroom.
need Google.
Do you want to take a break?
Yeah, should we do a bathroom?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
So you could do a recess.
We'll recess for 5 minutes. Merrimack TV, we can end our recess. Okay,
All
we're back
right.
here with Two Revolutions and Adam Rubin. The floor is yours, Adam.
Good evening. My name is Adam Rubin, and it is on. It's I usually have a playground voice. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. What I'd like to do is I'd like to take a few minutes, and I will aim for a few minutes, so you kick me under the table if I exceed a few minutes. Yeah, please. What I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of describe an approach. And Cindy, I don't know if you wanted to do any framing, at all. I'm happy just to kind of dive in. But what I'd like to do is spend some time talking about kind of the proposed approach and why we're uniquely a good partner to help support you in a transition to your future of learning. All right, so I will keep rolling. So this is a really important quote. Not that I think The Little Prince is essential reading for any of us, but I think this idea of agency and ownership is so critical when we talk about public education. I feel like we work in hundreds of districts around the country and with states and with higher ed, and I'll give you a little bit more background on us in a second. But one of the things that's missing is an opportunity for students, an opportunity for teachers, an opportunity for leaders, and an opportunity for the community to really have ownership over public education. Each one of those groups is such a critical stakeholder, and yet school so often happens to kids and teachers and leaders in ways that is unfortunate. And it's kind of a rut in the road, and it just continues that way. So keep that in mind as I kind of lay out a process. So who are we and what do we do? So there are a bunch of things that set us apart, but I'm going to come back to that. So I am a founder and a partner in an organization I started 13 years ago, and we're an education design lab. And the only takeaway I want you to have from that, because my wife in year 13 is a very intelligent woman and she still struggles to kind of articulate what exactly that means. Simply, it means that we don't come with the answer. We come with a process to help a place define the answer. And in this case, the answer is, what is Merrimack's future of learning? Like, what do you want kids to know and be able to do when they leave here? What are the values of this system? And then how do we support educators and leaders to move toward that? And that's really kind of the work that we do. Sorry for hopping around. There are four things, as I thought about your system and as I think about where you are, there are four things that feel relevant for this conversation that I think makes us a unique partner. One is, for the past 13 years, we've been helping systems all over the country define their future of learning. So we bring a lot of expertise around instruction, assessment, and leadership, but there are very few organizations that come with the question, what do you think your future of learning should be? It's really presumptuous of me to walk into any room as a national expert and come with the answer. And I find that education technology, of whom you're going to be seeing a lot of these days because there's a lot more money in systems right now around learning loss, there's a lot of need for more listening than telling people what the answer is. The answer can come later, but we really need to crowdsource from the experts, and those are our students, our families, and our educators. There's this idea about leading change, and you all are in a big transition. Every system in the country is in a transition coming out of COVID. Lots of systems are in leadership transitions. You're not unique, but you are among them. And we have to really think about, how do we navigate that transition? How do we navigate those changes? When we talk about professional learning, we've really believe, and we've had a lot of success with this idea of don't talk at the adults, don't talk at the educators, but model the practices that you want them to engage in. So we really lead with empathy, with invitation to build buy-in and ownership, because this is a mindset. It's a mindset game, and if you're listening to me, but you think I'm preaching to you as an educator, you will turn off. And there's a crazy amount of data, we have a lot of it, that shows how ineffectual professional learning is. We spend $18 billion a year, and the ROI is horrible on professional learning. And we are a really different animal. And then finally, and I think this is important to say, it's much more important to know by lived experience, but you want partners, you don't want vendors. And if you talk to anybody we've worked with in the country or in this state, you know, the meter is not on. We really come into this as a partner. So those are a few things that set us apart. Here are a couple examples, just because I think it's more interesting than me talking about us to talk about some of our work. So these are 3 current partnerships. They're 3 really different districts. So I think the headline here is Jefferson County, Kentucky is in progress. It's Louisville. It's 100,000 kids, 6,000 educators. We've been working with them for the past 3.5 years. Working with systems leaders, working with building leaders, and working with educators, and we're helping them transform to become the system they want to become. And I can go into a lot more detail, but I'm honoring your time, trying to honor your time. Dallas, at the other end of the spectrum, we started working with Dallas in 2014. Dallas is a really large district, kind of probably top 20 size-wise in the country, and we helped them set up a personalized learning office that was kind of a shadow entity. Now it's the main strategy for a district of 155,000 kids. So we've been working with them at the systems level, at the building level, and then typically now we coach 2, 3, 4 buildings a year just to help them keep moving it on in really kind of concrete ways. So and then SAU 16, which is a not near neighbor, but an in-state neighbor, we've been partnered with them for the past 3.5 years, doing a lot of work, and they are much more analogous to you. They're bigger. They're about 7,500 learners, I think, about 750 educators. And we've helped them kind of reimagine their evaluation system for leaders, for teachers. We're helping them right now build a balanced scorecard. We're supporting a lot of their educators with really innovative communities of practice. We're doing 2 right now, one on anti-racist, anti-bias teaching, and one on student-driven assessment. And we're helping that system move to a portfolio in grades 5, 8, and 12, which might be, I'm speaking a foreign language. So just trying to move away from assessment happening to kids to how do we empower students to really own their assessment and present and defend their learning. And it's really exciting. So 3 really different places. Jefferson County is focused on deeper learning, so heavily project-based. They've moved to a backpack for every kid, where kids present and defend, and they can't leave 5th grade unless they present and defend. They can't leave 8th grade unless they present and defend, and they can't graduate. So for a district that size to move in that innovative direction is really laudable. Dallas is one of the foremost personalized learning districts in the country. And then SAU 16, Exeter and surrounding towns, is in progress toward competency-based education. Like Diana, I spent a lot of time partnered with the state of New Hampshire, and every district in New Hampshire says they're a competency-based district, but you know, I've worked with a lot of them, and very few are. I think SAU 16 is making a lot of progress toward that, and that's a goal of theirs. You know, having a national partner is lovely, and it's also a liability. One of the things we've done since 2011, so I guess that's a decade now, is we've worked really deeply in this state. So we partnered with the state DOE for 6 years of really deep work. We helped them set a vision, you know, we helped them tell their story and raise a lot of money to tell their story nationally, got a lot of national foundations. We helped them reimagine professional learning as a state. We helped set up NHLI, so we helped give birth and set up, which is a statewide intermediary, because we thought procurement innovation was necessary to really attract and drive different funding. We've probably worked with, over the past decade, half of the districts throughout the state in some vein. And then our deepest work has been in Manchester. We helped set up, I was actually just emailing with the principal at MST. So the Manchester School of Technology is really a nationally recognized innovator. 2Rev led the redesign of that building. We worked with Parker Varney, and they were, I think, the 10 worst schools in the state, and they won the Eddies a year and a half later. And then we helped spearhead, I actually brought it, I don't know why, but Manchester Proud. So the business community in Manchester ran a really forward-thinking process to kind of set a new vision. It was about a 15-month process, and 2Rev was the partner driving that process with the community, and I think 10,000 community members were engaged in that process. In Exeter, I spoke to that briefly. We've been in partnership with Portsmouth school districts, and then we've partnered with SNU over the past 6 years to build really innovative graduate programs for New Hampshire educators and nationally. So I share all that just because context matters, and I think it's important you understand we do a lot of work all over the country, and we do a lot of work in your state, and your state, every state is unique. Your state is unique. So I think it's important that somebody understands the policy environment when you partner with them. All right, this I'm not going to read. I will share this slide deck with Cinda, who can share it more broadly. But we have a lot of experience. We're a really respected organization that focuses on helping folks set a North Star and then helping implement toward that North Star. So we've worked all over the country. What I'll flag is partnering with states, partnering with districts, partnering with hundreds of schools and thousands of educators every year, as well as a lot of higher ed. So I don't know that there's an organization out there that knows the field from all those vantage points, which gives us a lot of perspective and a lot of value to bring. Okay, so all of that was preamble. I apologize. I'm already getting kicked proverbially under the table. I apologize. So we've supported this large-scale change in systems, and a really important common denominator is adaptive and technical shifts. So what do I mean when I say that? Because we all have different language we speak a little bit. When I talk about technical change, that's how do I design a great project? How do I assess using a performance task? How do I build a portfolio for my learners? These are all technical shifts that educators in forward-thinking districts should know and be able to do. The adaptive change is probably a little bit more important even than the technical change. The technical change is teachable. The adaptive change is how do I navigate shift? How do I navigate a culture where there's mistrust? How do I support my educators? How do I kind of work with the school board and a community that might not be seeing eye to eye? So I'd be completely problematic if I got in front of you and said, we are expert at that. I think what I will say is we structure every engagement to be bottoms up and top down. Like decisions get made with the school board and with the senior team, and the community and the teacher community and students need to have a meaningful say. So all of our work tries to blend, how do I engage at those levels authentically, really? Like how do we engage thoughtfully? How do we listen to people? How do we provide them with venues for their voices and perspective to be heard? And then how do we also kind of help set a rationale, help build alignment at the leadership level? Teacher leaders, building leaders, systems leaders, the board. So, I think the kind of combination of those things is really important in any kind of engagement. I think the final thing I'll share is what the work that we put forward would be. And we see it as a two-part process. So, first of all, supporting the development of a community-generated vision for your future of learning. So we think that is, we've led this work in lots of different parts of the country, And that's partially about engaging a variety of stakeholders through focus groups, through interviews, looking at your data, and then ultimately coming to and hosting community design studios, forums, and faculty design studios where we really crowdsource from everyone. If there was an ad on I-293, a billboard, saying learning in Merrimack is, what would those values be? And, you know, much more of a coherence push and an alignment push is, what do we want every kid when they leave 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade in this system? What do we want them to know and be able to do? And that becomes a North Star. And then we offer, because I think having the North Star is good but insufficient. Lots of states have it, lots of districts around the country have it. It's how you use it. And we believe in the idea of deeper job-embedded capacity building to support early shifts in practice. So we've developed a really innovative model of communities of practice where we kind of lead with invitation. I think leading with mandate is problematic, especially for tired educators who have seen this and done this, and this too shall pass. So what we do, a lot of our change work is leading with invitation, sometimes incenting with graduate credit upon successful completion of it, but really leading with invitation and letting them have an amazing experience that is impactful for them, but impactful in their classroom, and then letting their peers see that. So typically, you know, 20, 30% of folks raise their hand and they say, yeah, we would love to do this. And then we do a 5-month cycle. And then the next time, because they've talked to their peers, because we close with a celebration of their learning, which really presents, where they present and defend. Here's what I did, here's what I thought. I thought it was complete crock, and oh my God, this was amazing. And it was really transformative. And then the next time, 45% raised their hand. And this is a way to help transform buildings over time. We also believe in this idea of capacity building, not training. So I believe in obsolescence for us. As soon as we can be successfully out, we want to be. And I know I showed you places where we've been partnering for a long time. The goal is to build local ownership, local capacity, find folks, teacher leaders who can co-lead with us. And what we do in a lot of our systems is the first time 2 Rev will lead. The next time we'll co-lead with teacher leaders who got it. And the third time we might not be around, or we might take a deep step back and they're leading and we're just lightly coaching them and giving them feedback. So through a process like this, you build a lot of buy-in and ownership, and you build a cadre of folks in your system who should lead this work and help scale it. I wish I had the answer to what the it is, but our entire business model is you have to define the answer for what your future is, and then we help you build toward it. So that's a lot of information. I'm going to stop and see what questions you all have. I mean, we have a lot more. I can go deeper on any of these, but please, Laurie.
Lori Rothaus.
So, So my
Yeah.
microphone wasn't on, I just turned it on. So again, just really quickly, do we survey our teachers to look at, you know, what are the practices that they feel that are really being successful right now? And then what are the practices that, you know, they want more help with, whether it's competency-based education or, you know, breaking down the walls to schools or, you know, some of those innovative practices?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and the answer is yes and. So, you know, one of the things we do, because relationships are at the heart of this process, is we try to meet with educators. A survey is a little impersonal, but it's scale. So we want all of that data. We also want to do focus groups in buildings. We also want to do focus groups with, you know, ideally, we've done elementary, middle, and high. Typically, we do middle and high, but it's totally a systems perspective. To understand, and when we're meeting with these folks, we want to understand what's working, what is exciting you, and what are you struggling with. So I'm not trying to lead the witness with practices yet. And then we get into design sessions, and then we try to positively provoke, provocatively put things forward. I think we don't know what we don't know, and we also are in the ruts in the road that we travel. So rather than ask an educator about their practice, I mean, we will, but I try, and I'm leading this tomorrow in a district, I'm leading this the next day in another district. Like, it's a really fun, imaginative, like exciting, really scary process for folks to go in and ideate. So we want to make it fun. We want to make it like a design studio has a connotation. We try to create this space where we show them images from the past and images from the future. And I kid you not, like Stanford University, you know, there's archival footage from the year 2100 we use. Like, what? Yes. Like, the Stanford D School came up with these videos they filmed a few years ago set in the year 2100 that looked at the year 2025 when they broke up Stanford. I mean, really pushing people to be like, oh my God, I never thought of that. And I think that's what's unique about this first part of the process. Like, if you ask me 10 questions, I might give you 6 or 7 answers. But if you push me creatively to think differently, the answers I come up with will be much more generative. You know, you ask a kindergartner how many things you can do with a paperclip, and they'll come up with 200. You ask any of us, we'll come up with 25. And, you know, we have to kind of get to the imagination and get to the passion for kids, get to the joy for kids, get to the joy for educators that is at the root of why they went into this, tap into that, and then see where we go. So it's and both. It's kind of interviews, focus groups, surveying, and then invitation to design sessions where we really push beyond.
Dr. McLaughlin.
Sure. So, hey, Adam.
Hey there.
So I want to sort of respond to Board Member Rothhaus's question by just sharing this. So, you know, 6 more weeks and then I'm gone. And what I would say is that I would really, you know, we had a good conversation some time ago, you, Cinder, and I, and I really, it means a lot to me to help leave the district in as good a place as I can. And there's some of the, I just want to be clear that some of the presumptions in the question were that certain things haven't happened or aren't happening already. Right. And it means a lot to me that people understand that that is not the case, that we have been working hard for years on a lot of the things that, you know, you've been talking about. And so I would invite you to reach out to me for what it's worth for the time that I'm here. We've already talked before, and I think it was a good conversation, but including, you know, John and the team, because the questions about sort of future ready, you know, aren't new to Merrimack, and we've been really struggling with them for a long time. And I don't mean struggle. I think struggling in the way that you would appreciate. Struggling is a good thing. You know, struggling, creative struggle is a good thing. So I just would say there's a context in Merrimack, and I know you know it because we shared some of it. Yeah. And I think it would not be, and I have no reason to think that that's what you're thinking, but it wouldn't be helpful to presume that there has been no work on these things. And then, because the teachers listening are going to be thinking, well, gosh, what about the conversations we've been having? And so to help the work, I think it would be important. And so I'm here for the time that I'm here, and I just would say, you know, reach out as you want, because we can really be, I think, helpful. And the presumption in some of the questioning is like, well, but, you know, do teachers have a voice? Yes. Have they been party to the design? Yes. Yeah. So clearly the work is not done, but where is it really ever? So anyway, that's just kind of what I wanted to throw out there.
Excellent, thank you. I so appreciate that, and this work is so personal for all of us. This is our life's work. This is our passion, and I really appreciate you saying that. Like, I work all over the country. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and there's no place where the work is done. It's all a work in progress, you know, so this is about tapping into that passion. There's no tabula rasa. There's no parachute that I take off when I land and say, hey, good news. Like, we're here. Like, no, you've been here, all of you. This is your community. This is your future. And we're really facilitating a very humble and respectful process where there is expertise on both sides of the table. You know, I think where we have had a lot of expertise and a lot of success is facilitating a process where voices get heard and folks get their practice taken to the next level. It's about growth. It's not about gotcha. And that's why leading with invitation is so important philosophically. When folks are ready, they'll hop in. So thank you for sharing.
Lori Peters.
You did share some of this, but could you go into more detail? What is the benefit for the community? What is kind of expand on their involvement? Because what we're proposing by inviting you here is really bridging the gap of, you know, all the things that have happened. And there's been a lot of communication. There have been surveys that I'm not denying that, but this is kind of a different direction. And I think the community really needs to hear what's in it for them.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. It's a question every taxpayer should be asking anytime you put somebody at this table. I think a few things. First of all, this is hard work to do internally. The best intentioned, huge districts, small districts, doesn't matter. Sometimes there's an important catalyst. So I think one thing is bringing a credible partner of the right values, of the right disposition to the table is helpful catalytically. I think we've just come through the most trying time in American education history, no question. The past 15 months have been unprecedented globally, but for American education, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of PTSD at the level of family. So I was an educator, I was a leader, I've been an entrepreneur, and then I'm a consumer. I got 4 kids in public schools. Like, I'm traumatized on every front still. So coming out of COVID, I think it's so critical to create a forum that you don't facilitate, that it's not like the local person from the next town, and there's nothing wrong with local expertise, but having a nationally recognized organization that helps support future of learning and has a success track record around the state and nationally, I think lends a different type of credibility to a process. And then the third piece that is really important is connecting a vision. So often places stop with vision. It's exhausting. It's like a question about stamina. It's a question about persistence, a question about resources sometimes. And that's why, you know, I didn't end on this slide artfully or from a choreography standpoint, but like these two things have to be connected. Like we have to have a great vision, and then we have to support educators with an invitation to start implementing parts of it. So I think those things, like you could absolutely run a visionary process and it would end with a doorstop called your vision for your future. And if you go to districts around the country, they've got really pretty strategic plans, but the number of them that have been implemented, because the practice piece is everything. Like there are structures and cultural pieces that will come up in this process. Our focus is practice. Educator and leader practice. How do we move the needle? And in some systems, what we do is we help build, and you know, I could show you, and I will show you if we partner together, like look for documents that aren't got you. And I loved that Diana was here because I'm in a district tomorrow and we're building a new evaluation system in New Hampshire. And the code of conduct and the code of ethics is really important. But so are the competencies for educators. I want to remake a vision, and then I want leaders and teachers to be accountable and supported to that vision, which means Danielson, which was written in the 1980s, might be great, or it might not be. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think the point is taxpayers should hear that these processes are not inexpensive, but I think that there's huge value to investing in your community's future, and it's a tiny price to pay if the return on investment is a better future for your kids and educators who feel empowered and community members who have a voice heard. And again, I want to circle back to this idea of you've just come through a period where everybody's been talking to everybody about everything, and to kind of get energy and excitement about innovation, about the next leg of this journey. It's like a reset. It's a springboard back to where you were heading before COVID knocked us all off. So I don't know if I hope that answers your question.
Well, and I think COVID not only just knocked us off, but the path has to change because of COVID. You know, like I think that there's no back to where we were. It's a different springboard than we were on before COVID. So at least that's what I think. Jenna?
So I just want to say how much I appreciate you and I appreciate your approach. I love that you said that it's a humble approach. I wrote humility down while you were talking. The fact that you're approaching this from this humble standpoint, but that we also have to do that as well. I think one of the things I want to, that I feel obliged is the wrong word, to say is, or a responsibility to say is, you are not sitting here, at least as from where I sit, because we think the leaders of the Merrimack School District are doing a terrible job. You're not coming in to clean house. I don't want to make people nervous. You know, when I know I've been a teacher in a district, somebody's brought into the school board meeting, and you're like, what does this mean?
Exactly.
Where's this going? Who's
Yeah.
going to be fired? That's not the approach that I hear at all here, but I want to say it out loud. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about all of the things that you're talking about, taking the work, like you said, what Dr. McLaughlin said, the things that we heard in this Merrimack Reimagined, you know, taking those things that we were all excited about, I think, when we heard them, and marrying them together with your process, working with our leaders to do what is absolutely best for Merrimack, and then come alongside them when they've been working so hard to the point of burnout over the last year, coming alongside them and supporting them as they create this vision and enact it. It is about working with them, not against them. And I just want to make that clear to anybody who's listening, also to those educators that are listening, to the administrators that are listening. You know, I see this, and I love that you said that it was a humble process and the co-constructing. I want that to be the preeminent thing that people are thinking. It's a co-construction with if we partner with you, with our administration, with our leaders, with our educators, and with our community, so that together, after this nightmare we've all been through, and through these transitions that we're now going to go through with, you know, our high school principal and our superintendent, we're going to have to, this is like the perfect storm. I think many of us feel like we can see it coming together to be a all hands on deck. Hey, Merrimack, what do we value when it comes to education?
Yeah.
Let's get everybody on board and on the same page, working together towards the same goal. And when you talk, I just get so excited about that, but I just really want to make sure that it's not this, he's coming in to clean house and that's what the board wants to do. I don't think that's my heart. I don't think it's the heart of the board in general. And I want to make that clear because I know that leaders and administrators can be nervous about something like that. And I feel like that reassurance is important.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. That goes without saying, but it's really important to be said. So let me take a second. I think we've worked on 450 engagements in the past decade around the country. Every one of those places was a district that was progressive and innovative or was trying to move in that direction. There is never, ever, and that's the reason I put the values that I didn't speak to before, is I want you to hear this. Like, our reputation is grounded in educational equity, community-driven definitions of success, building capacity versus training people. That we don't train. So if you want trainers, that's not us. engendering authentic ownership of the change process and embracing the power of human-centered design. And that last one is like, start with your users. Who are your customers? Your kids and your families. And this process needs to work for them. Who are your customers? Your teachers in a different vein. This process needs to work for them. So there is no, if anything, you're an innovative district, you're progressive, and you're trying to go to the next level. And you're coming out of COVID and you're being smart. And, you know, again, it's not my place to say, but applauding the knee-jerk to hire, because this is a process, and something like this lays a foundation for a hiring process with just much more clarity. And I don't know from whence I speak about your system, but I know everybody's been knocked back on their heels, and to be able to kind of hit the ground in January, February, March with like, here's who we are, here's what we're doing, we're experimenting in these ways, and we're really excited, and we're excited for a leader to say yes to us, not to kind of back into the leader who's left on the list.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because honestly, I've been in this district for 13 years. I'm going to say this as confidently as I can. You would be blessed to come and work with us.
Yeah.
Our leaders are fantastic. You will learn from them. They will give you great ideas. We do innovative things in Merrimack, you know, and we would love to partner with you to take that to the next level. But our people are awesome, and so we would love you to be able to work with them to take us to the next level of that. So.
Absolutely. And the final thing I'll say is, I don't know how much this logic resonates or not, but this work is not successful if it happens to your leaders. There's not, of 450 places I've led parts of this work or all of this work, it is DOA if your leaders see this as a threat. So your leaders need to be kind of that's your leadership team, that's your building leadership. Whoever is on your admin leadership team, they're a key stakeholder group to see themselves in this work and to see their success as part of this work. So that's the alchemy when, you know, when it works, it's got to kind of, everyone needs to see themselves as part of this work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did you have a question, Matt? I thought I saw your hand go up. Any other questions, comments? Anything you need from Adam? Okay. All right.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay, Shannon?
When you work with the district, I know that you mentioned phase one. And I know we got kind of a cost estimate for phase one of $40,000 in your initial.
Yep.
What's the timeline for that?
Well, the timeline is really, it is really incumbent upon you. I mean, how long does it take?
Yeah.
Is what your question is. I thought
A
your
little bit,
question was
yeah.
when. That's a process that can be 3 months, can be 4 months, can be 2 months. I mean, having folks, it's access to people is why I'm pausing. Like, this is a challenging time of year to a certain regard to do this. I think back to school is a challenging time of year to do anything, like, you know, because everyone's just frantic. So I think figuring out the right time to do this, I think given that we're having this conversation on May 17th, unless the stars aligned and you guys felt strongly, I mean, you've got graduation coming up in a couple of weeks. So I think the goal would be, if this made sense to you and to us, to kind of lay the foundation this summer, have us understand your data, have us talk to admin leaders, you know, have us talk to folks more informally, and then let school get started, and then really kind of do design studios, you know. So that's the temporal piece, is I think figuring out the when. If this was happening on January 1st, this could be a process. This first part could be done by March 15th. Okay. So it really depends on when in the school year, when during the calendar year you're doing this.
Right, and then I know there's a part two, because we talked about a part one.
Yeah.
And is that a la carte to design? Is there, you know, rate card estimates? Is, you know, I know you've been talking about schools that you worked with for years. What are the annual expected costs to engage?
Yeah, so we didn't include numbers in the first proposal because we didn't know enough. We don't know enough yet, so there's some ballpark prices here. typically when we're working with a place to run a community of practice, typically is 27.5 to 36.5 or 36,750. The variables, just so you're clear, are how many people are we talking about? Are we doing in-person or virtual? What's the size of a cohort we're working with? And then are additional coaching supports, desired? So all of those factors have small price implications. Typically, in some of the districts I named, we're running an elementary and a secondary COP right now. So we do that in a lot of districts. I think it's important for like age, teachers to be working with their peers across buildings. I think it's important for secondary teachers to start working together across buildings. So there's a lot of details to be unpacked, but I think arriving at clarity around some of those variables can get a more concrete price, but it's a small range.
So we're looking at between probably roughly 75,000 for those two parts if we're going on the heavier side because of the timing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the ideal, just to take a question that you didn't ask yet, is if it were to happen, if this work were to kick off and be September, October, November on the vision, it'd be great to get some cycles of educator learning, later in the year, culminating, with presentations of learning in April, May by the educators. So kind of a 4 or 5, and that second process is typically 4 to 6 months, depending on those variables for educator learning.
Okay.
So a system will often run multiple, but the nice thing about a school year is then you can springboard into the summer with a lot of teachers who are fired up, who could be leading some of your pre-service or in-service work if you guys do that.
So, and then subsequent years, because you're talking about schools you've been working with for, 5, 6, 7 years. What are annual, I guess they're maintenance costs?
Nope, nothing.
Nothing.
Okay. We have a wonderful relationship, and you're like, we have a vision, we built capacity, thank you, and we'll be like, thank you, that would be great. And all the learning is yours, all the content is yours. I think folks stay with us because they like us, because we're good, and because systems are complex places, and they want to do subsequent rounds of this kind of training. They want us to help them reimagine their evaluation system for leaders and for principal, and for leaders and for teachers. I mean, there's any number of reasons why we stay on. But this process, nothing would make me happier than you guys say, we're really happy and we can take it from here.
Okay.
So I think for process, what we decided is that we would, you would present, basically give some time for the community to respond to us in the presentation. And then at our next school board meeting, which is June 5th, take a vote. Does that still sound good to everyone?
If I could just ask a question of Matt before we go
Sure.
that far. And I know that we are in a position of surplus, which we are every year, with, based on what, worst case scenario budgeting. But what we haven't talked about is the legal budgeting process. This is nowhere in our budget books. We didn't discuss it, we didn't present it, we didn't prepare it, we didn't vet it as a cost that we were looking to ask the taxpayers for. So Matt, what are the RSAs around this? And what will we do to be able to hire a firm that we didn't project in our budgeting process?
Well, excuse me, the board has the ability to encumber funds. So all we need legally is either a signed contract or a vote to encumber X amount of dollars from this year for the purpose of blank. And if it passes, that's all I show my auditors, and it gets put into the reserve for encumbrance account.
So a vote
And
by
it
this
gets-
board, not by, a vote by the taxpayer, but a vote by
Vote
this
by the
board?
board,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
You have the power to do that.
Okay.
Jenna?
So, God bless Diana Fenton. She talked for a little while, and she may have lost half the town just because they may have just kind of checked out. You know what I'm saying? So how are we going to make sure the town sees Adam's presentation, or pays attention to what he said, or I want to make sure we
Can you put it on the website?
we do something that draws attention to this particular block after the break we took, to point people in their direction so they can hear this discussion, they can hear what Adam's saying, before the June 5th meeting. I feel like we have a responsibility to make sure the town, anyone who's interested, sees that particular point as opposed to it being buried in the midst of a 3-hour board meeting.
Well, we could do two things. One is to put it on our website like we frequently do with presentations.
Perfect.
The other is to run it through our Facebook, run his presentation there. And we could also say, tune into Merrimack TV, go to time marker, you know, X hour, and, you know, whatever. So if someone wanted to go right to it, it makes it a little more convenient for them.
And if we could get a copy of the presentation, we could post it on the website.
right, yeah, she said.
Post a link on Facebook. We could give it a lot of visibility
Okay.
in different forums.
Dr. McLaughlin.
I just, because the date June 5th has been, and if people are listening, the actual meeting is June 7th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, no, that's fine. I just, people,
Yeah.
yep, I just, anybody who's still listening might be
Yeah.
wondering. So it's actually June 7th.
Thank you.
Adam, do you have a 2-minute promo video or something like that that you use?
We have a 7-minute animated movie on the future of learning that we developed, but I think, yes, we could give you that. I think we could also give you a cleaner version of this, and what I mean by that, just to be clear, is there's a lot of slides in here. We could give you the kind of 7 or 8 slides of just the facts of who we are and what we're proposing, if that would be helpful. So
And then your
maybe both
website.
of those things.
Your website as well, right?
Our
You can-
website is
yeah.
pretty built out, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll look for that from you over the next couple of days.
Yes, I will get you this as a PDF, a slightly abridged version.
Okay. Any other questions before we conclude this item? All right, well, thank you, Adam Rubin, for staying so late with us tonight on a busy weeknight. So thanks for coming out, and we appreciate your presentation.
Thank you all.
All right, next item on the agenda is HB 544. I've added this because we do have an opportunity, if we choose to be able to write in one way, shape, or form, possibly opposition, as other districts in the state have done. In an article dated 4/6 in the New Hampshire Business Review, it states that many in the business community and other employers are speaking out against HB 544. Employers like Dartmouth Hitchcock, Velcro, Stonyfield, Hypotherm, as well as leading universities like the University of New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire University, as well as private investors in social well-being in the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and Community Loan Fund. What I was planning to do was just to table this and just provide an update that we have that ability to be able to write out in opposition. And what I found out from State Representative Rosemary Rung, she told me that the bill was tabled, and so certainly it's important to discuss the status of that bill because it does impact education in our state. But the language was put into the budget bill, she said. She said if it survives the Senate, the House will vote on this bill on June 24th. So that we've got a little bit of time, but we can consider if we want to table this or not. So moving on to, well, any questions on that before we move on? Okay. The next item is the Merrimack School District COVID case update. I asked Dr. McLaughlin to provide us with just a high-level update of what's happened since we've gone back since the governor's mandate. And so I will turn it over to Ann.
Yep, thank you. So I just want to provide the board and the community just with information about what has been our reality since we started back on the week of April 19th full-time. So what I provided, pardon me, the board, is our 6 schools and the 3 weeks, the week of April 19th, which was the week leading up to April break, then the week of May 3rd, and then the week of May 10th. So that's what the board is looking at now. And I can just run through it quickly for you. On the week of, at Mastrocola Elementary School, the week of April 19th, 7 students were quarantined, and we had 2 positive cases. The following week of May 3rd, and again, remember there's April break in the interim, 6 quarantines and 2 positive cases. And then the week of May 10th, 21 quarantined and 3 positive cases. At Thornton's Ferry, the week of April 19th, 16 quarantined and 1 positive case. The week of May 3rd, 1 quarantined and 0 positive cases. And then the week of May 10th, 1 quarantined and 0 positive cases. At Reed's Ferry, the week of April 19th, 4 quarantined and 1 positive case. A week of May 3rd, 0 quarantined, 0 positive cases. A week of May 10th, 0 quarantined, 1 positive case. Pardon me. The upper elementary school, a week of April 19th, 4 quarantined, 0 positive cases. Week of May 3rd, 10 quarantined, 0 positive cases. Week of May 10th, 7 quarantined and 0 positive cases. At the middle school, week of April 19th, 12 quarantined, 3 positive cases. Week of May 3rd, 13 quarantined, 4 positive cases. Week of May 10th, 18 quarantined, 1 positive case. And at the high school, week of April 19th, 9 quarantined and 2 positive cases. Then I just I put in yellow because we have data from the April break because certain things happened during that break. And so I just want to say only you have this for the high school. The week of April 25th, there were 6 quarantined and 23 positive cases. And then the week of May 3rd, 15 quarantined and 0 positive cases. And then the week of May 10th, 10 quarantined and 0 positive cases. So that's the been our health update reality since we came back to school, full time. And I just would also remind the board that because of the technology, particularly at the middle school and the high school that we have in place, that unless you're actively ill, you've been able, students, if they've been quarantined, they have been able to continue their education because we have that capacity through the technology that we invested in through the grants, the grant money that was available to us that we had to expend by December 30th. So the good news is that then we've also been able to continue, being able to provide those supports to elementary students as well. So the good news is that for many students, because of the way that we've put things in place, they haven't lost that time, even though they have educationally, even though they've had to be quarantined. So happy to take any questions.
I just have a quick clarifying question. So in the cases, where you have students quarantined without any positive cases, is it fair to assume then that those folks were quarantined because of activity outside of the district?
That's often the case, very often the case. And so what happens is there are cases where we've had, the number of different examples is a lot, but families who've traveled, let's say. And as a result of the travel, they have been in contact with somebody who was positive, and then that translates back into the buildings and so on, or any number. Just think of the scenarios. So yeah, in most cases, I would say it's fair to say most cases that, pardon me, that is the case. Yes.
Questions from the board? Okay. Moving on to the next item, it's item number 11, update regarding the REAL program and parent survey.
Yep. So I'm happy to, so what I would say is this, I was talking to the chair and so we don't have hard numbers from the survey results yet because we closed the survey very late, I think maybe as late as midnight on Friday. We left it open for the weekend. Right, left it, so I had mentioned that we wouldn't have that because we're having to compile, it's an awful lot of data. What I can tell you is that what I imagine the board will be wanting to consider, kind of apropos of the conversation that you just had with Adam, is what does the future of remote learning look like in Merrimack for those who choose it? And we have been, I think, pretty good, and the administration, certainly the board, has been pretty good at being mindful of the choices that families want to make and be respectful of those. And so the question becomes, what is the official position of the board relative to those families, however many they end up being, who wish to exercise that option for whatever reason they see fit to do so. The other thing that I would point out is when we first proposed even the idea of the Real Academy and the coordinator, we said that thinking into the future, one of the things that we thought would be really important to do and sort of innovative is to reimagine what we do in traditional things like when, for instance, a student is suspended. Oftentimes now, or almost exclusively now, when a student is suspended, they're suspended from their learning as well. And it begs the question, is that the most innovative way to approach a behavior challenge? By dealing with the behavior, but then also having the education be the price you pay for the behavior. So one of the things that we proposed was the fact that maybe now the Real Academy could expand. It was born out of COVID, but it might theoretically be able to include other innovative uses of technology and providing the opportunity for families, or rather for students, to continue to access their learning so that punishment for an infraction doesn't automatically equate to a loss of education. So that's just another thing that we had talked about. So there will be a time when, I don't imagine it'll be necessarily as early as the fall, because there will still likely be students who need to quarantine in the fall, and if that's the case, what do we do in those cases? And in those cases, we have the capacity now in the budget that was just approved by the board and passed by the town. We have a coordinator who can coordinate all that. But there will come a time when that won't be the factor anymore. But then the question then becomes, well, what do we want to do as a community about leveraging some of our resources to be able to do some other innovative practices? So that's one point that I just would make and suggest that the board, continues. I know you will continue to process through that and think about those implications. The other thing that's important now is that under the governor's current emergency order, I'm just going to read it. This is from the from the governor's current emergency order. New Hampshire schools shall retain the option to offer full-time distance learning or hybrid instruction that encompasses aspects of both in-person and distance learning for any student who elects one of these options. And then it goes on to talk about how districts need to offer full-time, and that's clear, and we've done it. We were going to do it before the order came out. But when it comes time to schedule for the fall, our principals need to know what are the numbers of students who will elect that option, because it's still a viable option under the current governor's order. So if we didn't ask the question, then we would be in a position where there might be families in the fall or late summer who would ask, I would like to not be in school. And then all of the schedules that were built and the time and energy it takes to build that would have to be undone. That's always been, the challenge of undoing and redoing, is because schedules get set. So under the current order, we're kind of required to plan for that. Now, not having looked at the numbers, I couldn't tell you whether there will be, 10 or 110 or whatever. So I'm proposing that on June 7th, we'll come back and we'll provide you with that. And that's just another data point for the board to continue to, figure out how it wants to proceed. But in any event, that's just the high-level sort of summary of where we stand with the REAL program and the survey that went out to families and why we put out a survey to families.
Thank you. So we'll have more discussion on the 7th.
Yes.
I don't want to get into any long discussions right now. Does anyone have any quick questions or comments they'd like to make? Okay. Moving on to the next item, it's the approval of the May 3rd, 2021 and the April 22, 2021 non-public minutes. Do I have a motion?
Do you want to take them separately or together?
Well, let's do the May 3rd, 2021 minutes.
I'll move the May 3rd.
Made by Shannon, second by Lori. Any updates or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, that's 500. Now the non-public, April 22, 2021. Do I have a motion? Made by Shannon, second by Lori Peters. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, none, that's 500. And then we did some of these other housekeeping items earlier. Next, we move to committee reports. Any committee reports? I see Jenna and then Lori Peters and then Lori Rothaus.
So both Lori Rothaus and I were part of the Healthcare Cost Containment Committee meeting, where they talked again about the incentives that they're giving out, the Shaw's gift cards for, to educators and staff members around the district, kind of as a mental health boost for, just related to COVID with the health trust money. So that's going great, and I think they're getting a great response from the educators about, it is a simple little thing, but they're still excited, and they're going to be bringing the National Mental Health Alliance in to speak to educators, and so there's a lot of great things going on, and there's a lot of support for our educators there that I didn't realize was there, so I'm kind of appreciative of being on the committee so I can hear all of that that's there.
Lori Peters.
So the Budget Committee met, and Chuck Mower retained his seat as chair, and Naomi Schoenfeld came in as vice chair this year. They have decided to fill my seat, so they have opened that up for public interest, and they will be holding a meeting to interview those candidates. One thing that the chair did request and ask for me to communicate to the board is one of the things the committee would like to see as we move into the budget process is a little more clarifying information on line items in the budget. Instead of broad strokes on some of those items, they'd like to see more details, so their intention is to notify us of what areas they want more detail when they start their budget process.
Thank you very much. Lori Rothaus.
I just got accepted to the Parks and Rec on Thursday, so I'll be going to the Wednesday meeting. The 275th, which is kind of an offshoot of that. If you notice, they put all the 275 flags up, and the clothing line, Mike Petroselli is doing the clothing line, which should go online this week, and every 2 months they're going to have different things that people can buy for Merrimack celebration.
Thank you. And Shannon.
I actually had a couple under the New Hampshire School Boards Association. So on the 13th, I met with, and I brought the letterhead because I didn't remember the name of it properly, the New Hampshire Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. And there was a panel discussion with Commissioner Edelblue, John Broderick, who is retired Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in New Hampshire, really going over that return to school. That was the topic of the panel discussion, and it was obviously designed for curriculum developers. So it really got into supporting health and safety in students and staff in the fall, and I think we talk about this a lot. Our schools and families can do best support students and staff. How do you balance our focus on teaching and learning and mental health of students? And what are going to be the experiences that students need to have as they return to school in the fall? We've got into anxiety that students may be feeling. And then, from the different roles, we had school board members, we had medical professionals, we had a pediatrician who works at a hospital that really got into what she's seeing with youth coming in with suicidal ideations into emergency rooms that were never really presenting before with any anxiety. So how do you bring all of those, interests together to make sure that, the whole child's being addressed as you're addressing the school year? So that was on the 13th, and then today, I met with Senator Shaheen, a few of us from the board of directors, and she really wanted to go over the funding that came around for this third round of funding from the federal government and how it's being used. And I think what came up was that, it's good, but for some of the large projects, it's not going to be enough. So, it does, and then there's also the supply and demand issues that we're dealing with for things like one-to-one devices. It's a great idea, but how do you execute it when devices have a national shortage? So again, how can we make sure these funds are available to us when we're able to use them? And, ventilation came up. And then, of course, developing and executing and funding proper social emotional learning programs and staff to support it. And curriculum to support it, which a lot of districts in the state don't have. Just to be able to address those funds and use them to really help the district. And what really came up a lot is, do we have anything in those funds that helps to support staff? Because they are also going to feel and have experienced, a lot of that anxiety and emotion. And, is there anything school boards can do with funding and programs and, initiatives? And are we doing that? Or are we relying on programs through, say, the New Hampshire School Administrators Association to kind of come up with a webinar? Is there something more we can do that's systemic that funding could be helpful for? So that was today's discussion.
Dr. McLaughlin.
So Shannon brings up something very important that maybe we could consider under new business, if you would allow me to go back.
Of course, yeah.
So one of the things that's going to be very important, money is a good thing to have, but it can also create some unintended consequences. And those of you who've been around for a while might remember the ARA funds of years and years ago. And that was just this massive influx of money. But what we in Merrimack said was that we really have to be careful about what was then called, and I think is still appropriate, the cliff effect, meaning that we could use a bunch of money that we get and staff the heck out of a lot of things. But when that money runs out, two things happen. Either the district has to pick up the money that isn't there anymore, or those initiatives that were staffed by these people then just boom, go away, like overnight, poof. And so I think that as this community, the board and the administration continue to process the expenditure of these funds, it's going to be really important to think of not only what's attractive at the moment, but what the long-term consequence may well be, and whether the district chooses to sustain it. So and maybe that nothing needs to be said later, but I just would offer that as just off of what Shannon said, just a really something I think that's going to be very important to consider.
And I think Nancy Rose would be a great resource for that new agenda item, because honestly, when it comes down to it, the number of devices that we procured in the last 12 months are not going to have vastly different shelf lives. Battery life, all of that's going to play into it, what we can do. And then some of the stuff that we deployed was we turned Windows devices into Chromebooks, stripped them down to Chromebooks just to get something into the hands of a child, but it was not necessarily the ideal platform. So all the things we did to get by are not necessarily going to get us through long-term with all the things we're talking about with initiatives. So yeah, it's exactly right, but it's something to be interesting. I think a healthy dialogue to what to expect ahead of budget season when they ask for it. So I think that'd be very good.
That was a very interesting update, Shannon. Thank you.
Well,
before we go on to public comments on agenda items, I just wanted to ask if we could get the COVID numbers on our website. I meant to ask that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then public comments on agenda items.
There's one. It is from Scott Adler at 3 Deerwood Drive. Merrimack School Board members, after listening to the graduation plans, I agree with Jenna Hardy. This is an overly complex plan that is confusing and unnecessary. While I recognize that we all have endured a significant amount this year as a result of the pandemic, school districts around the country are starting to get back to, quote, normal and holding graduation the way they have in years past. Please consider holding graduation as it was prior to the pandemic. Many people have now been vaccinated or have the opportunity to vaccinate. Stores are beginning to revise their mask policy and no longer require those that are fully vaccinated to not wear a mask. Please give the class of 2021 something normal for this year as their high school time comes to an end. Regards, Scott. And just one little refresh, and I think that's all we have.
Okay, and there are no citizens in this room either. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Jenna, seconded by Lori Rothaus. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries 5-0-0. We'll go ahead and sign the manifest. Thank you and good night.